you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Give me a ring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. I'm Peter Cardwell. What do you want from the new cabinet? What do you want from them? What do you want them to do? Nigel Farage, of course, has been garnering huge accolades in Birmingham from his party faithful. 12,000 people in Birmingham will be live there as well, with all the action from Reform UK Party Conference, as well as examining where we are politically in the whole of the country, because Keir Starmer has shuffled his pack, but it's a lot of the same people. And actually, a number of people have been in touch already saying, look, it's just the same people. They're doing slightly different jobs, but this is shuffling the deck chairs. What do you think about it all? We're also talking about Graham Linehan this morning. He was arrested this week simply for putting out tweets regarding trans people, one of which he says was a bad joke. He says he's moving to Arizona because free speech is dead in this country. That's what Nigel Farage said in Washington this week. He's had a busy week. He was talking to Congress there on Wednesday before his big speech yesterday. So loads to discuss. Tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. As you know, on all my shows, I want to get as many people on the air as possible, as many opinions as we can get on the show. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can send me a WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000, a WhatsApp text message, or a WhatsApp voice message. Voice notes, of course, are always welcome. Keep them to less than a minute, please. You can ring me on that number as well. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. I'll be here right through till 1, loads to discuss. And Ian Collins is going to be in the seat tomorrow. I'm taking a day off, but I'm back on Friday, so don't worry about that. Lots to discuss. There's so many different things. Let's start with the politics, actually. We've quite a few things to show you. Let's go back a bit this week and talk about Angela Rayner admitting she didn't pay enough tax on her flat purchase. This was an interview with Sky News she did, and this is something that really set the tone for the entire week. It was inevitable after she did this interview that she said she didn't pay enough tax, that she had to go. We are having trouble with that clip. at the moment, but what we do know, of course, is that Nigel Farage has been talking about Angela Rayner. He has been at party conference on yesterday and indeed brought forward his speech. It was meant to be at 5 o'clock. It ended up being at 1 o'clock because Angela Rayner resigned. This is what Nigel Farage said yesterday about Angela Rayner.
But you simply can't get away, can you, from being the Housing Secretary and avoiding £40,000 of council tax. And it screams to entitlement. It screams to a government that, despite all the promises that this would be a new, different kind of politics, is as bad, if not worse, than the one that went before. We've been told that right now the Prime Minister is organising a reshuffle, yet another reset, and that the names of the new cabinet will come out later on this afternoon. Well, I didn't want the Prime Minister to do anything to spoil our conference, and that's why I've come on the stage now to say they are not fit to govern.
Well, Nigel Farage making some big, bold promises yesterday, saying he'll stop the boats in 2 weeks as well. Richard Tice, his deputy, possibly the next Chancellor of this country, says that actually Reform UK may need to look again at the £90 billion of tax cuts that they have put forward. Farage also under pressure himself this morning from the Daily Mirror newspaper. They say luxury house Farage boasted of buying was purchased by his partner, slashing the tax paid by £44,000. Stamp duty hypocrite. If Nigel Farage had paid for his Clacton home, it would have cost an extra £44,000 in stamp duty. I mean, I don't really understand why he's a hypocrite if his wife owns the house. Richard Tice was asked about this by Mark Dolan a bit earlier this morning. I don't really understand why he's a hypocrite, but there we are. Mark Dolan asked Richard Tice. This is what Richard Tice told us.
Look, I'm not Nigel's tax advisor. I've no idea what you're talking about. What I do know is that
this is Reform
Angela Rayner
UK sleaze,
Here
we go again.
Absolute twaddle. Angela Rayner promised one thing. She promised to eradicate sleaze and have a sort of a government of integrity. She was always calling for people to resign, and it turned out she was just another hypocrite, and that's the reality. So look, we're making great progress, and that's why we're leading in the polls.
Richard Tice there speaking to Mark Dolan a little bit earlier on this morning. Let's talk about the Conservatives as well. Kemi Badenoch dancing on Angela Rayner's political grave. This is what the leader of the Conservatives has said.
Angela Rayner is finally gone. It says everything about Keir Starmer's weak leadership that he had to wait for a report before acting. The truth is simple. She dodged tax. She lied about it. Her position was untenable for days. Keir Starmer once promised honesty and integrity in politics, but when faced with this test, he hesitated. No principles, no backbone. We Conservatives forced this investigation and were vindicated, but this isn't the end. Questions remain. What did Keir Starmer know and when? Did he mislead the public? He has now lost a Deputy Prime Minister after losing a Transport Secretary, an Anti-Corruption Minister and a Homelessness Minister to scandal. His government is in crisis, and all of this is a distraction from the profound economic crisis the country is facing because of his decisions. While Labour hike taxes on ordinary families, their own ministers dodge paying tax themselves. One rule for them, another for everyone else. The country deserves better. Only the Conservatives under my leadership will deliver that.
That's what Kemi Badenoch says. Well, let's speak to Darren Paffy MP. He's a Labour MP for Southampton Itchen. Darren, you're very welcome to the programme. A bruising week for your party?
Morning, Peter. I mean, there's never a dull week in politics, of course, and there's, as you said, quite a lot to discuss. But I mean, listening to some of the froth and the hype there, I mean, people have got incredibly short memories of what happened under the previous government, where people were found to break the ministerial code and they were protected by the Prime Minister. look at the contrast now. The investigation has been quick. Angela, who has been a towering figure in our politics and leaves behind a fantastic legacy, has admitted that mistakes were made and she's taken full responsibility.
Okay.
That's what a difference in leadership looks like.
But the problem is, Darren,
we've toughened the rules and we've stuck to them.
The problem is, Darren, though, that she admitted she made a mistake when she'd been found out. And what we've seen a pattern here. There have been 4 people who have resigned from the government, the Labour government, in the last 14 months. All of them have been found out by journalists who have alleged various things against them, some of which some of those people, like Tulip Sadiq, for example, deny. But the point is that there is a pattern here, is there not? Because Labour said they were going to stop this, Labour said they were going to be whiter than white, and they absolutely are not. The Conservatives may be in no position to criticise, and I've taken various people to task from the Conservative Party this week on that. Priti Patel, for example, was found to have bullied in the Home Office and wasn't sacked. In fact, the ethics advisor resigned. So I'm not sure the Conservatives are in any great position to criticise Labour. But what we're seeing here is a pattern from Labour, are we not?
What we're seeing is higher standards being brought in. That's one of the things that the Prime Minister did. He toughened.
How can you say there are higher standards when 4 people have resigned in 14 months?
Because they're being held to a higher standard. Now, you'll know that politicians, like journalists, like production teams, like anyone, they're not perfect. The difference is, if we make mistakes, the best ones own up to it and they take the consequences. And that's exactly what we've seen happen.
But Angela Rayner didn't own up to it. She owned up to it when she was found out. She wasn't going to voluntarily say, by the way, I haven't paid enough stamp duty. It was journalists and other political pressure that put the pressure on her. And the fact is that she admitted she made a mistake when she was found out, and that's a pattern.
And she referred herself to the ethics advisor, and she has followed
she had to, though, didn't she?
Every bit of advice and consequence that has come forward out of this. So, and this has all happened within a matter of days. What we remember, not that long ago, 12 months, 18 months ago, we had ministers who had to be dragged kicking and screaming to the ethics advisor. 2 ethics advisors quit under Boris Johnson, such was the chaos. So the difference is night and day. There are
I'm not sure the difference is night and day,
follow them, and they have taken the consequences for that.
Let me tell you what a lot of our viewers and listeners, not all of them, but a lot of our viewers and listeners will see that you're very much like the Conservatives. Okay, there may be, as you point out, slight differences in terms of what happens, but the Deputy Prime Minister has resigned this week. There's been a reshuffle, and it's a lot of the same people. Is Keir Starmer running out of road here?
No, I mean, the reshuffle has been planned for a while. Indeed, you in the media have been speculating about a reshuffle for quite a while. The opportunity has been taken under Keir's leadership to do that full reshuffle now. And it also comes out of listening to what the country is saying. So we are hearing that. I spent a lot of the summer going around estates in my constituency, not always the Labour voting ones, certainly not where I would be told what I wanted to hear, but actually what was important for me was for me to hear what people are feeling at the time. And what
do they tell you, Darren? I'm really interested.
They want the change.
First
they
of all,
want the change that we promised, and they want it now. And a lot of those things, I was able to point out the action that has been taking place. And what they want is to see that change happen quicker. So what Keir is now able to do is to say, let's have a look at who is in what position. This is nothing new. This is nothing particular to Labour. Governments under every colours do reshuffles from time to time to make sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time to deliver the right priorities. So we've been spending this first year putting out the bin fires that we were left by the Conservative government. What we now need to move to is this new phase of delivering the change that we promised in the tough circumstances that we continue to be in.
So was the change not delivered in the first 14 months then?
The change has been delivered. I mean, you've seen a number of things happen. Interest rates have been brought.
That's not to do with the government. The Bank of England sets the interest rates.
But we're looking at a country where there is more stability than there was before.
Is there? We've got gilt rates are the highest they have been. They're higher than when Liz Truss crashed the economy. We've got an economy on the brink. We've got an asylum system which is out of control, a Home Secretary who's been moved to Foreign Secretary because she hasn't done a good enough job. We've got a more hardliner in Shabana Mahmood brought in there. I mean, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement of Yvette Cooper's 14 months in the Home Office that she's been moved to the Foreign Office, is it?
There are opportunities to change from here on, and what Keir is doing is saying these are the priorities that were in the first year of us taking control at a time where, you know, the Conservatives had essentially crashed the economy. We've got away from
the fastest growing economy in the G7. I'm not disputing that.
And the GDP has been the fastest growing in the G7 in the first part of this year. We've seen wages increase in the first 10 months of the Labour government.
And inflation is out of control.
More than they did in the previous.
And inflation is out of control, and those wages don't feel as if they're actually buying people anymore. Food inflation is out of control, Darren. The country, as you will know from talking to people in your constituency, people don't feel the benefit of rising wages because food inflation in particular is out of control and inflation is very high. Interest rates may be low, but that's not a ringing endorsement of what you do, and that's not your achievement. That's something the Bank of England, which Gordon Brown made independent, has decided. Darren, what do you feel the achievements of phase one were?
Look, no one is saying that where we are now is perfect. Of course, that's not the case. But where we have seen investments into our schools, we've got free breakfast clubs. We are seeing, you know, wages rising. We have delivered. In fact, this was part of Angela's legacy. The higher minimum wage. We've seen those wages grow, but we know it's not enough. No one is saying that the country is perfect. And no one...
I know that.
Sorry, just let me make this point.
Sure.
You'd be a fool to think that in just 1 year we could undo all of the chaos that we had seen under previous years, all the lack of investment in our public services. We've got waiting lists down. People have seen that difference. We've got more support for working families in terms of bringing school uniform costs down this week as they return to school, and free breakfast clubs, the extension of free school meals. All of those things make a difference. But what we're saying is there's a lot that we've had to do. There is, of course, a hell of a lot more to do.
Okay.
We're not where we want to be, but we're taking this opportunity. Keir is taking leadership and control, decisive leadership.
He's not in control. He's not in control. Darren, he is not in control. His Deputy Prime Minister has had to resign, and you're saying, OK, look, getting waiting lists down, good, well done. I'm glad that's happening. I'm genuinely glad for many of our viewers and listeners who are on waiting lists that want to get those waiting lists down. Great, good for West Streeting. I hope more of that happens. That is an achievement of the first year, and I hope that that continues to happen. Free breakfast clubs, I mean, that's fine. I don't want any kid to go to school hungry. Of course I don't. But that's throwing money at a problem. That's just spending. Raising the minimum wage, for example, that's a huge cost for businesses. I don't want people to be poor, but one of the reasons the minimum wage has had to be raised is because inflation is so high, and because people need that money. Of course they do, but the cost is not borne entirely by the government. In fact, it's mostly borne by small businesses. You've hammered them with national insurance employers' contribution rises. There are going to be more tax rises in the autumn. You're not on the side of businesses. You're not on the side of entrepreneurs, are you?
Well, that's at odds with the growth forecast that the OBR and the IMF have said. Actually,
growth is nowhere near where you want it to be, and nowhere near where you need it to be.
We haven't said we've arrived at our destination. What we're saying is there is far more work to do, and we're getting the right people in the right place to carry on that work. He's been really clear about this next phase of delivery. He's made changes to his own staff in Number 10, changes to the cabinet, because we are saying there is far more to do. It will take a long time to turn around this big tanker ship that we inherited that was not in a good place, but we are making the right decisions to get the foundations in place, now moving more to deliver on more of that change that people want to feel in their pockets. And we absolutely get that. And we know we have not arrived. But that's the reason for why we need to look at who is delivering, our pace of change, and because we are listening to the country. Every single one.
Is the country listening to you, Darren? Because, I mean, I'm really glad you've come on this morning, and you know, you fronted this up, and you're always very good, and you talk, I think, pretty honestly in regard to what your feelings are. And that's great, because not all politicians do. But the fact is that if you look at the polls, you're 10 points behind Reform by one of the most generous polls. Another poll by BMG said you're 15 points behind Reform UK. The Conservatives are nowhere. The Lib Dems are sort of doing all right-ish. They'll maybe lose a few seats. But the fact is, for a government to be in this position, for a Prime Minister 14 months in, to be so unpopular, that is not a ringing endorsement of his policies. People say they want change. Maybe the change is from you to another party, to Reform UK or another party.
Well, that's what general elections are for, of course. If people want to make a different decision, they, of course, have that opportunity. What they did just over a year ago is to give Labour the mandate set out in our manifesto, and we want to get on with that. The only poll that eventually really matters are those general elections where people have that opportunity.
But you've been behind. You've been behind Reform UK in over 70 polls since the election. That's not a one-off. That's not something you can ignore. That is a trend. And I mean, the polls that do matter, you say, are elections. Well, we've had a council election where Labour didn't do particularly well. We've another one coming up. Reform UK did very well. We've another council election coming up in May where you're forecast to lose many, many hundreds of councillors.
Well, look, Reform are ahead in the polls, depending on which ones you read, and of course,
well, all of them, every single poll, every single published poll in the last 70 plus published polls show Reform are ahead.
Peter, you've been around politics to know well enough that they are populist. They can say what they like, and actually, I heard this on the estates where they claim they're doing pretty well, where people are concerned about things like the cost of living, about immigration, so on. What they didn't say is that they saw Nigel Farage as the answer. They hear a lot of anger, a lot of froth, a lot of finger pointing, but what they don't hear as answers or action. And you look at the number of times in recent interviews with journalists such as yourselves, when Nigel Farage has simply said, I don't know. That's not a party with a plan. That's a party with a lot of anger, riding the wave, as Nigel Farage always does, until he starts falling out with people. And you want to talk about chaos. It's having to sack nearly half your MP group already in the first year of there being Reform MPs. That doesn't speak to a group of people with a detailed plan and who are really listening to the country, other than to ride the wave of populism. You want a government with a plan. That's what we're looking at now. We're moving to that second phase of the plan to deliver the change that we were asked by the people of this country to deliver just over a year ago. We're not quitting. We're not slowing down on that. We want to put our foot on the accelerator, and that's what people will see in the coming weeks as Keir's leadership and the changes that he's making to the cabinet start to take effect as we move into that next phase. We're not going on stage singing about things as we've seen in the Reform conference. This is not about a show or just riding a wave of populism. This is the hard graft of actually changing the country and delivering a clear plan to make people better off. That's what government's about. You can do the populism and the headline grabbing all he likes. And I was pretty galled to hear him talk about entitlement when he goes swanning off. I don't often see him in Parliament because he's off earning every single month what every other MP earns in a year.
You're just jealous?
No, I'm not jealous. I've been elected to do a job. I'm perfectly honest that, this job is well paid. You'd be a fool to try and pretend otherwise. I don't need or want to earn any more money because I've been given the job by people in my city to go and vote on their behalf to make changes.
But Nigel Farage going abroad, I mean, Keir Starmer is perhaps not, as no Prime Minister can be, the most dedicated constituency MP because he's running the country, and he's abroad on many, many occasions. This week, for example, he's going to New York to the United Nations General Assembly. Nigel Farage is the leader of a large party. OK, they've only got 4 MPs at the moment, but they've hundreds of councillors, and they're forecast to have many, many more MPs after the election. Surely being a global statesman and having links, better links, actually some would argue, than Keir Starmer to the American administration is something he should foster.
Once again, I would argue the difference is night and day. Keir is going as the elected representative of this country to the international community to deal with international challenges. What we saw this week is Nigel Farage fly off to the States, trash and talk down our country, suggest that we should be sanctioned because he doesn't get to say what he likes. At exactly the same time, he is precisely going around and saying what he likes. What you won't see Keir Starmer do is go fawning after Donald Trump or praising Putin. He's getting on with the hard graft of government. That's the difference. Okay. And so I don't think going around and earning big money on media launches or big dinners is precisely the same as being the Prime Minister of the country. And I think that's what many people, including those that Farage claims to speak for, would want to see from someone who is serious about politics, some actual answers, some actual delivery. And we're not getting that from Reform. Just look at the chaos of some of the councils that they're now leading.
Darren, final question before you go, and thank you for your time this morning. In regard to Graham Linehan, big controversy this week about the creator of Father Ted being arrested at Heathrow. He has given an interview to The Times this morning that he says that free speech is basically dead in the UK. He's moving to Arizona. Will you miss him? And what do you think of this? I mean, he's a great creative talent, no matter what you think of his views on trans. What do you think of what the police did this week, especially as Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Metropolitan Police, says it's up to you as MPs to sort it out?
I mean, I think we're a long way from being a country where free speech is dead. I mean, you look around the world, there are places where literally you are banged up. You know, in some cases, have still capital punishment for saying the wrong things about the wrong people. If anyone thinks that's what Britain is like, I'm sorry, they need to give their head a wobble. But one thing I would say is that I agree with what my colleague Wes Streeting said this week about where the priorities for police are. Again, we are listening to what people say. My constituents say they want police on the streets. Not falling over tweets, although, again, we shouldn't hide from the fact that when people put hate speech, and I'm not saying that's what it was in this case, but, you know, we've seen others who have called for migrant hotels to be burnt down with everyone in them. If you think that's just something you can tweet and get away with, I'm sorry, that is not right.
Okay.
But there are priorities to policing, and we want to see a country where there is law and order everywhere, on the streets, and respect in speech that we make public.
Darren, thank you. That's Darren Paffey there, who is the Labour MP for Southampton Itchen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. What do you think of what he's just said there? Give me a ring, use the break, make the call, 0344 499 1000. If you've never phoned us before, Tommy's on the calls today. You give him a ring, you make your point, and then we get as many people on as we can between now and 1 o'clock. We'll take your voice notes too on that number. Send them through WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. Debate Desk is next.
He knows how to solve the £50 billion black hole problem. We just stop feeding David Lammy and let him fly around the world.
Come on, look, I've got somebody else for you. This is fun. Look, here we are.
Hello, chaps.
The chairman of Reform has come by. How hard have we been working today?
Really well. And look, I have to just say thank you so much for everything you did. It was just so good to have you.
It was great. It was good fun.
It was really good, and you were fantastic with people, and that's the point I've been making about this party, which is it is built from the bottom up, not the top down. And you can see that, can't you? You saw the enthusiasm.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has responded to that interview with Darren Paffy MP. Dave says, I thought the Tories had their heads in the sand, but your Labour MP takes the biscuit. Kevin Southampton says, Darren Paffy is spouting nonsense. I work in Southampton NHS and waiting lists are not down. There are waiting lists that are coming down across the country, maybe not in Southampton. So I think the point does stand, and that is a factual point. Cliff in Berkshire says, free breakfast clubs, nothing to be proud of. It just highlights government failure by making these clubs necessary. Dan in Kent, I said on Talk when Labour got in, it was the beginning of the age of hypocrisy. 4 ministers have resigned because of hypocrisy. You can't have a Labour government in a majority capitalist country. Well, we do, Dan. It's pure and simple as that, and that is why Reform UK are flying high in the polls. Democracy will prevail. Tony from near John O'Groat says, I was an entrepreneur. To get a pay rise, I had to sell more of what my customers wanted. Otherwise, I'd be getting nothing. A pay rise to public sector workers for no increase in productivity has to be paid for by me and my customers, says Tony. And Margaret in Birmingham says, I want Starmer to put the British people and the country first, stop globe-trotting, and above, stop the boats. It has to be top of the agenda. Shabana Mahmood has to start off with detain and deport. No more gimmicks, says Margaret in Birmingham. Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We'll take more of your calls, voice notes, and all the rest of it between now and 1 o'clock. Loads of time to get your call in on 0344 499 1000. Let's go to the debate desk. Delighted this morning to be joined by Zach Wagman, who's a Conservative councillor for Stanmore. Hiya, Zach.
Morning, how you doing?
And Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor. Good to see you, Scarlett.
Hi.
Quiet week?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, so little has happened.
So little has happened, yeah.
I haven't had to sort of think, is she going to resign? Well, maybe.
Will she, won't she? And then she did, and this huge cataclysm of political events happened. What do you make of it?
Yeah, OK, so first of all, it was very clear as soon as she went to the ethics advisor, that he would find against her that and that she would resign. She wouldn't be sacked, she would be resigned. And we have to say that this is good to not have somebody hanging on. And the other thing is that the ethics advisor said that she had acted with integrity, but she hadn't basically read the small print, as they said, we think it's okay, but you should take more advice.
Do you think she acted with integrity, Zach?
I don't think so, no. Realistically, when you're a senior government minister, you have to take extra precautions when you're doing something complex. And from what we've heard, her financial and family situation is complex. And when you're buying a house, that's a major financial and legal commitment. And therefore, it's up to her as the Deputy Prime Minister to take the advice and take extra advice and follow that. And she just didn't seek that advice. We found out she tried to then, to add to the question of integrity, she told all her colleagues that everything she did was above board and they all went out and defended her. Then she threw the conveyancing firm under the bus when they had to come out and say, we didn't give the advice she said. It's all been about her throughout this. The government was dancing around her so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, till suddenly they all realised maybe she didn't do everything she said. That's not integrity.
You're a Conservative councillor. Is your party in any position to criticise about sleaze?
Well, it's sort of not really about parties. I can sit here and tell you I don't think Angela Rayner's acted with integrity. The reality is there were Conservative ministers over the last 15 years in the same way there were Lib Dem ministers when they were in government. There have been Labour ministers now and there were before, and there will be ministers in all countries of all parties forever that won't always act with integrity. But when we're talking about Angela Rayner, this isn't a party political issue. She didn't act with integrity, she was dishonest, she didn't pay the tax she should have paid, and that's it.
Look, there's no question she's guilty and she was right to resign, but to be fair, the tax guy from the Daily Telegraph, a right-wing Conservative newspaper, said that he would have given her exactly the same advice, and he said what it shows is that it's too complicated. But
it was the advice based on the information that she gave her lawyers. The lawyers were on the front page of that same paper, the Daily Telegraph, saying we calculated the stamp duty based on what we were told.
No, I completely agree. What I'm saying is that he says, that's how complex it is. But actually, I mean, Zach's right. All parties do it. I mean, we've just discovered that Nigel Farage saying that he bought a house in Clacton, actually his partner bought it, and therefore avoided massive stamp duty. Nothing illegal.
That's in the Mirror today, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, is there?
No. Well, nothing wrong with that, except he talks about my house, it's my house.
Well, it is his house, he lives there. He may not own it himself,
Yeah,
but
but
he lives there. I mean, I talk about I talk about where I used to live. My parents owned the house. I didn't.
Yeah, but Peter, we know that it was done so that he could avoid, you know, thousands of pounds in stamp duty.
Loads of people do that. I avoid tax by having an ISA.
No, everybody does it, but that's what happens.
What Angela Rayner did was she lied about it and she got it wrong.
And the hypocrisy is not just that; it's that for years Angela Rayner was at the forefront of calling other people liars and saying that other politicians didn't act with integrity. You know, think about the way that when Nadeem Zahawi was fired from government a couple of years ago under sort of similar circumstances in the sense of a tax dispute and a complicated case, she was right there saying he had to go. You know, whereas now, when the tables have been turned on her as part of her tax-raising government, when she's decided, like you say, like we all don't want to pay, you know, maybe as much tax as the government wants us to, she was there raising taxes, but has then been saying, you know, oh, it's sexist, it's classist to be attacking me, and that's not the case. You know, she's thrown her party under the bus to protect herself, and she didn't even manage to do that.
Look, she got it wrong. She got it wrong. Unlike Nadeem Zahawi, you know, it wasn't millions, it was tens of thousands, and she referred herself to the ethics advisor, and as soon as he came back, she left. You know, that it was very simple. And
but she apologised and she resigned because she was found out. She didn't voluntarily say, by the way, I haven't paid this stamp duty. She was backed into a corner and she did what she had to do because of journalism, because of attacks from other political parties. This was not a voluntary thing, Scarlett.
No, it wasn't a voluntary thing, but she did do the right thing.
Okay, well, she did the right thing when she was found out.
In resigning.
We're going to talk much more about this. We're going to take a look back on what Angela Rayner has said previously. We're also going to talk about the reshuffle, big reshuffle. Will it make a difference? And we're asking the question this morning, what do you want from the new cabinet? It's some of the same old faces, of course, but they're in often very new roles. David Lammy is the Deputy Prime Minister, the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. We'll get our debate desk panellists' thoughts on all of that, and yours as well. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Max in Warwickshire, who says your interview with Darren Paffy, wow, typical Labour. They will not admit the party's in trouble. Peter, I bet you felt like banging your head against a brick wall. I know I did. Same old Labour, never anything new. They don't see Nigel Farage as a threat. Wake up and smell the coffee, says Max. Andy in Northamptonshire says, Cardi P, I'd much rather a politician say I don't know the answer than to hear lies. Yes, Reform has lost a couple of MPs. Labour have now sacked or either sacked or had 11 resign, and they're the ones in power. Brad in Cambridge, yes, Reform still have some building to do, but after watching that wonderful first day of their conference, I feel the first burst of optimism I've had since COVID. Thank you, Reform UK, says Brad in Cambridge. And Paul in Leeds says, seriously, how has Mad Ed Miliband not been reshuffled into the North Sea? Starmer is just trolling us now with some of these appointments. We'll talk more about that in a second. I just want to look back on what Angela Rayner said about tax. This is something she said a while ago about tax in the budget and people paying tax. This is what she said.
Every pound of tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services, and we know the state they're in. So the former Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately, and was threatening legal letters to anyone that questioned him. Now it emerged actually that that's not true, and that there was a HMRC investigation and that he's had to pay penalties for that. I think that makes his position untenable.
That was about Nadeem Zahawi in 2023. I mean, one other big thing that has happened, of course, as a result of Angela Rayner going has been the cabinet reshuffle. One of those people who has left the cabinet is Lucy Powell, the former leader of the House of Commons. And while all of this was happening, while all of this huge political tumult and upset was happening on Thursday, what did she do? She used her appearance in the House of Commons to congratulate Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce on their engagement. She is best known, I would imagine, to our viewers and listeners because of her appearance on the BBC's Any Questions a few months ago. This was in June, when Tim Montgomery, who you've seen on the station many times, talked about a very good documentary which I've watched on Channel 4 about rape gangs. This is what Tim said, and then this is what Lucy Powell said.
I don't know whether you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs over
no,
this.
we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, okay.
There was a real issue
let's get that dog whistle out, shall we? Yeah.
Scarlett Maguire, will you miss Lucy Powell in the cabinet?
I think Lucy was quite good at making enemies, and I think that I mean I think what we've just heard was pretty appalling and very, very unfortunate. I think by and large, actually, she was much better at interviews and she could do it well and she would stick up for the government. But I think it was the right time for her to go.
Ian Murray as well, he slagged off Larry the cat, and as we know on this programme, we are big cat people. Cat of the Week, of course, ran for 100 editions on the show, and Ian Murray slagged off Larry, said he was a little S-word, and Larry's still there, Ian Murray isn't. That's all I would say.
Well, I think Larry's seen more Prime Ministers.
Well, he has. He certainly has. He's seen
of various colours.
Of various colours. He's seen off David Cameron and Nick Clegg and all the rest of them way back until then. But now he's seen off Ian Murray as well. So don't mess with Larry. You know, slag off Larry and find out. That's what I say. On a perhaps more serious note, Zach, will you miss Lucy Powell and Ian Murray?
Look, I'm not quite sure I'd recognise Lucy Powell or Ian Murray if they walked past me and I
could wouldn't recognise you, Zach.
They wouldn't, that's fair enough, but they were, until yesterday, cabinet ministers. But I think, you know, the clip that you showed is symptomatic of what many Labour MPs, not all of them, think when they think no one's listening. Obviously, that one was recorded on a broadcast show, but I think that is what is in a lot of their minds. They're dismissive of the concerns of ordinary people.
Hold on. I think most Labour MPs think that what happened with the rape gangs is absolutely appalling and should have stopped.
So why did they not do more about it from day one?
And well, actually, if you remember, it was Keir Starmer who said when he became Director of Public Prosecutions, and there was, I forget the name of the guy in the north said, look, Keir, there is a real problem here. And he reopened investigations. He was the first person.
But my point on this, and good for Keir Starmer for doing that, my point on this is that Jess Phillips is someone who is now a Home Office Minister. She was campaigning on this for a very, very long time. Surely what you do on day one is say, I know exactly what I want to do, this is the job I've always wanted in the Home Office, let's get going. Instead, she resisted a national inquiry into rape gangs and had to capitulate.
Yeah, and because she thought, because she'd run an investigation in Telford that had worked very well, and she thought that local things were actually better than national.
And they can work, and I've spoken to a KC who ran one of those, but it wasn't a good look. It didn't do what she should have done in government, and she made a mistake, I think.
Yeah, I think she did.
Okay.
I think she did make a mistake, but I just think that we do have to say that most Labour MPs took the rape gangs very, very seriously, and people like Sarah Champion have been talking about it for years.
Okay.
And they go very broad.
Well, we've covered that many times, and we'll continue to cover that and hold the government's feet to the fire on that national inquiry, which still hasn't started. Zach, on the reshuffle more generally, do you think it'll make a difference?
The reality is, I don't think it will make a difference, because there's so many of these people have been moved from one job to another, having totally and utterly failed in their previous job. You know, take City Steve Reid, for example, who, not content with waging war on the farmers, and we know what the changes he made to the agricultural inheritance tax have done, is now the Secretary of State for Housing. Yeah, Angela Rayner's not exactly left him a great launch pad in terms of house building and hitting their target of 1.5 million homes. But yeah, he failed there, he's moved. Liz Kendall absolutely failed in the Department for Work and Pensions. Her job was to reduce the bill, reform the system to encourage more people off welfare and into work. She's been promoted to Science and Technology Secretary. Don't know what her background there in that is.
I'm not sure that's a promotion.
No, I wouldn't call that a promotion.
Is anything Zach saying wrong, Scarlett?
Yeah. No, I think to say that. I mean, I don't think Steve Reid did fail, and what I think is actually...
A lot of farmers will disagree with that.
No, a lot of farmers will disagree, and I think that he wasn't very keen on the agricultural inheritance tax and was not given a choice about it. Okay? It wasn't his idea.
Okay. So why not do the decent thing and resign from the government?
Well, because the thing about MPs is they're very ambitious and they stay in government. But anyway, so I actually think that he was very good when he was at Lambeth Council. I think that he will go on, and he's got Matthew Pennycook, who I think will be next to go into the cabinet, but I think they can't lose him from housing, because he really has got things going.
The thing is with Matthew Pennycook, who's a housing minister, may not be well known to many people, but quite frankly, Angela Rayner delegated quite a lot of stuff to him, because he was a details man, and she was not a details woman when it came to housing policy, as we found from her demise. The Home Office is, of course, the area, the great office of state we keep as close an eye as possible on in this station. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement of Yvette Cooper's 14 months as Home Secretary that she's been moved to Foreign Secretary, is it, Zach?
Well, exactly. That's a promotion. You know, Foreign Secretary is another of the great big offices of state, and as you say, look at her track record. All the briefing we've had out of government in the last 24 hours is that they've promoted Shabana Mahmood to do that, because she's seen as a doer, she gets things done, she's achieved things. So as you say, that's a tacit recognition that Yvette Cooper has not got things done, not achieved things. So quite why she's still sitting around the cabinet table in a hugely important role, following on from David Lammy and trying to keep relations with America. Will she undo his awful deal on the Chagos Islands, for example? She's been promoted to a hugely important role in recognition of the fact that she did a bad job. And because Keir Starmer is too weak to really sack anyone, we discussed the two ministers he sacked that are not exactly in senior roles and are not household names. He was forced to reshuffle these roles and reward failure, which is ultimately what Yvette Cooper has done in 14 months at the Home Office.
Keir Starmer's doing this from a position of weakness, isn't he, Scarlett?
No, I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to do what didn't happen a year ago, which was to get a government that's really going to move very fast. And I think.
But if it's the same people who were there a year ago, well, it is.
Okay, yeah, but look, Shabana Mahmood has really moved on justice.
She's let out a lot of prisoners.
Well, that's because she was left with a legacy of prisons that were overflowing. So she had to do something about it. She apologised about it. She said what she was going to have to do. I mean, and also what she's been looking at, which is really interesting with Lord Timpson, is prison reform. Now, she's on the right of the party. There's no question about that. So she is coming in to the Home Office to really ramp things up. Now, I think that the problem with this, I mean, the real problem with the reshuffle is it should have happened in July, because apart from Shabana and the whole small boats, what would have happened with the small boats is actually it would have given people a few weeks to read themselves in. Instead, they get to their desks on Monday and they have to begin all over again.
You know, I do agree. You know, Shabana Mahmood is one of the cabinet ministers that has progressed things. Whether you agree with them or not, she's achieved things. Then why is Keir Starmer sat there and going, I've got 15 ministers that haven't done any. One's done a good job in a really tough department. Let's give her something else to do. You know, she's got a really important job of fixing a prisons crisis that you say was unfortunately inherited by this government. She's got a big job on her hands, and he's gone, yeah, I will give that to someone else, someone that's abjectly failed in the Foreign Office.
The fact is that every reshuffle creates enemies, even when you move people to different who knows how happy Liz Kendall is to be Science Secretary, for example. So you're going to create enemies, but I mean, it's interesting that Keir Starmer's saying we've refreshed the team and we've moved things and whatever. I mean, he hasn't really. There are a lot of just the same people, and also a lot of our viewers and listeners are really quite worried that David Lammy is now Deputy Prime Minister, Scarlett.
Well, I don't understand why they would be worried. I think he's perfectly competent. He'll be very good.
He's perfectly competent. He's done a dreadful job as Foreign Secretary. He gave away the Chagos Islands.
No. Actually, when you do foreign policy, it's really the Prime Minister. It was Keir.
So he didn't do anything as Foreign Secretary?
No, he did. But I mean, that's why.
What did he do?
Okay, so he's pals with the Vice President of America.
After calling Donald Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. He did.
I know, and a lot of people have called Donald Trump a lot of names, including...
They're not the Foreign Secretary.
He wasn't Foreign Secretary at the time.
But he wasn't Foreign Secretary and he became friends with J.D. Vance.
And he became...
Let her speak.
He became... So he's got a very good relationship with J.D. Vance. Keir has got a very good...
After illegally fishing with him.
Yes, that was... that was a bit of an oversight, I think we might say. They might go fishing again when J.D. Vance comes over again. I mean, I actually think that his biggest thing, and I know that before the election, before Trump got elected, that he, as Shadow Foreign Secretary, was putting an awful lot of effort into getting relations with Trump, and that's one of the things he did. And J.D. Vance and David Lammy have both got history of not being nice about Trump.
OK. We're going to talk about Nigel Farage in a second. We're also going to go to Birmingham and speak to people at the Reform UK conference. I want your thoughts on all of this as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
but look, we laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Leslie says, what do I want from this new cabinet? Please call a general election before there is nothing left to save of this once great country. And Jeremy in Tel Aviv says, Labour cabinet reshuffle, same clowns, different job titles. Mark in Norfolk says, which of these is even a story? Which one would you expect to be in the public interest? Nigel Farage pays the correct amount of tax. Nigel Farage's partner owns a house and has paid the correct amount of tax. Or Angela Rayner has not paid the correct amount of tax, says Mark in Norfolk. Actually, this is something that Richard Tice was talking about a little bit earlier on in the programme. But of course, Reform UK's conference, we're going to go there after the news actually is happening. Nigel Farage has made some big bold claims. The main one yesterday in a speech that he's going to sort out the small boats in 2 weeks. What do you make of the Reform UK conference so far, Scarlett Maguire?
Well, I think that's really interesting about sorting out the boats in 2 weeks. I mean, it sounds like Donald Trump saying, I will stop the Ukraine-Russia war in a day. I mean, it's easy to say it. It's incredibly difficult to do.
What do you think, Zach?
I agree with that. Yeah, it's a good ambition to solve the issue. It's a very complex issue. If it was simple, the previous government would have fixed it, or this government would have fixed it, or there would be a fix. It is complex. It's not unsolvable, and I don't doubt that Nigel Farage does want to solve it. But it's, I believe, is the case with him, selling simple solutions to complex issues, and ultimately it cuts through. We're talking about it here. It's the sort of comment that everyone has noticed.
Is it frustrating for you as a Conservative? Like Kemi Badenoch, I mean, she had an open goal this week on Angela Rayner. She asked 2 questions about it within other questions, Prime Minister's questions. She's really, we played a clip from her earlier, but Nigel Farage is everywhere this week. OK, it's his conference, so he's going to be. But nonetheless, the Conservatives are just nowhere at the moment, Zach.
It is really frustrating. As you say, the Leader of the Opposition gets every Wednesday the chance to be the front and centre of attention, and while I think Kemi has generally done a good job at that, this week she didn't take that, and I suspect she would recognise that herself as well. The challenge is getting attention, but now we have a shadow cabinet of 20-odd people. They're not necessarily all household names or particularly well known, but they're capable people, which is more than Reform have to offer. They should be out every day, every single one of them, talking to shows like this, on the radio, on podcasts, on social media, because they have the time and they have the ability. We can make a noise, we can get our message out there if we really push it.
How does Keir Starmer need to deal with Nigel Farage?
It's about delivery. So one is communication. Is he's got to say things and then he's got to do them. And what he's got to do is he's got to say what this government is about. He's got to be much clearer. And what I'm hoping is that in the minor reshuffle on Monday that most people didn't hear about is they've made Tim Allen, who runs Portland Communication, who used to work for Tony Blair,
quite a number of horrible foreign regimes.
I'm sure he is absolutely no saint. But what I hope is he knows how to communicate, because that's been one of the problems of the government. Is what we don't know about this government is what it actually has achieved.
Is the communication the problem, or is the message the problem?
No, well, communication, message, but also we don't know what this government has achieved, right? We don't know. I mean, they've
I asked Aaron Paffy, he said free breakfast clubs.
Yeah, well, I think, unlike your listeners, free breakfast club, but you have to say free breakfast club, so it means that there are an awful lot of poor children who are actually eating. Thing. No, I think it's
just saying
great.
There's a lot more to do.
For 12 months.
No, that's not all there is. Come on.
Okay.
Minimum wage has gone up. That has affected masses, millions of people.
And cost businesses millions as well. Scarlett McGuire, former Labour advisor, Zach Wagman, Conservative councillor for Stanmore, thank you both very much for joining me on the debate desk this morning. What do you make of what they've said? And we'll go live to Birmingham in just a few minutes as well. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell with you right through to 1 o'clock here on Talk. Loads to discuss. Let me know your thoughts on everything we're talking about today. Nigel Farage is at Reform UK's conference in Birmingham. We're going live there in just a minute, so you can stay with us for that. He has been talking about Angela Rayner. He's been talking about stopping the boats in 2 weeks. Do you think he can do that? And what do you want from our new cabinet? It's new, but it's not that new. A lot of the same faces, certainly, although the guy slagged off Larry the Cat has been dumped, and rightly so. Lots to discuss here on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, you can send me a voice note. Keep those coming in. On the main number, you can send me a WhatsApp text message. On the main number, you can ring me on the main number 0344 499 1000. I'll get as many people as possible on the air between now and 1 o'clock, and we'll be live in Birmingham at Reform UK's conference in just a second. So stay with us here on Talk. Well, Nigel Farage brought forward his big speech in Birmingham to 12,000 people who have attended the Reform UK party conference. Jeremy's there, Mike Graham's there, Alex Phillips is there, as well as a few others as well. And indeed, yesterday at around 1 o'clock, about 1:15, Nigel Farage spoke about the fact that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, had resigned about an hour before. This is what he said.
But you simply can't get away, can you, from being the Housing Secretary and avoiding £40,000 of council tax. And it screams to entitlement. It screams to a government that, despite all the promises that this would be a new, different kind of politics is as bad, if not worse, than the one that went before. We've been told that right now the Prime Minister is organising a reshuffle, yet another reset, and that the names of the new cabinet will come out later on this afternoon. Well, I didn't want the Prime Minister to do anything to spoil our conference, and that's why I've come on the stage now to say they are not fit to govern.
And a big pledge was made by Nigel Farage, his headline pledge. We're going to talk about it in a second with the political editor of The Sun. He said he could stop the boats in 2 weeks. This is what Nigel Farage said.
We will stop what is a threat to our national security, what is a danger to girls and women on our streets. We will stop the boats, and we will detain and deport those who illegally break into our country, doing what nearly every normal country around the rest of the world does. You cannot come here illegally and stay. We will stop the boats within 2 weeks of winning government.
Well, let's go live to Birmingham now. Jack Elsom is the political editor of The Sun. Jack, quiet week?
Yeah, they say a week is a long time in politics, Peter, but yesterday 24 hours seemed like an absolute lifetime. I probably had the most gruelling shift I think I've ever had. I didn't actually get to see much of the conference yesterday because I was in a little press room round the corner, keeping an eye on what was happening in Westminster and trying to keep an eye on what Nigel Farage was doing at the same time. So, yeah, no rest for the wicked.
What do you make of what Nigel Farage has been saying? He says he can stop the boats in 2 weeks. Is this hubris? Is this too much? Do you think that claim has merit?
Well, it sort of reminds me of Donald Trump's claim before he got elected that he could stop the Ukraine war in 24 hours, and he's finding that a bit more tricky than he first promised. And I suspect that Nigel Farage, if he gets into Downing Street, will find that claim to stop the boats in 2 weeks also a bit far-fetched. But listen, it's obviously being lapped up by his supporters. We do live in a sort of an era of vibes where the more radical things you say, the bigger applause that you get. There's a big one going on behind me right now in the conference hall. Clearly Nigel Farage has managed to sweep to a pretty massive poll lead, about 10 points by the last count, largely due to his hardline stance on immigration, particularly the small boats crisis. He said that he would tow them back to France. Anyone that came here illegally would be immediately deported, and he would leave the ECHR. Now, I think that sounds well, and I think that lots of people will agree with that. I think that Nigel Farage's problem, which he's been saying, to be fair to his credit himself, is that he will come up against an enormous pushback by the Whitehall machine, civil servants who, let's be honest, wield a lot of power in this country, probably much more than any minister, bar the Prime Minister himself. And you have all these treaties to unpick, you have all of these sort of civil service to get past. I think that's what's going to be his real challenge when he gets in. It's interesting, though, with Nigel Farage, because, you know, throughout his political career, I think he has really battled to be taken seriously, whether it was in UKIP, the Brexit Party, despite having millions of votes with the two. But I think that it's really an exercise, this conference, in showing that he can be serious, and he does have a plan for government, and he's laid out a deportation plan previously. We're now getting pretty frank admissions that he knows he doesn't have much experience in government among his team, and therefore he's going to get a department for preparing for government. What a contrast that is to the current Labour government.
Tell us about that, actually. Tell us about that, Jack, in terms of this preparing for government. Who's he put in charge? Who's involved with that? What are they actually going to do? What detail do we have on that, Jack?
Well, Nigel Farage has been pretty open that he wants sort of a more American-style system. You know, he's going to come in. He's only got 4 MPs at the moment. If he does get elected, you know, you would imagine him having, you know, 300, 400 odd MPs to form that majority. But none of them have had any experience in Parliament before, and none of them have had any experience in government. And so what Nigel Farage has said is that rather than picking your ministers from a pool of MPs or peers, as has at the moment, what you would seek to do is take captains of industry, people who've had business experience, people who've had experience in the real world, and put them into departments. You probably have to do that via the House of Lords to have some parliamentary accountability. That's what happens in America. You know, Donald Trump's cabinet is not made up of people who served in Congress. It's made up of people who have come from different walks of life different expertise, and that's clearly the playbook that Nigel Farage wants. I also think it's interesting because he's accepting quite a lot of Tories, the Tories who he spends a lot of time attacking, people like Jake Berry, people like Nadine Dorries. And when you ask him why he's done this, both of them are very good friends with Boris Johnson, who Nigel Farage loathes and constantly blames for that massive rise in immigration. The reason he says that he's doing it is because at least they have some experience in cabinet, and at the moment, experience in government is the one thing Nigel Farage is currently lacking.
Well, let's actually hear from Nadine Dorries. She spoke to the conference in Birmingham yesterday for Reform UK. She's joined them now from the Conservatives. Quite a number of other Conservatives have as well, people like Jake Berry, for example. This is what Nadine Dorries had to say yesterday.
Why? And I'm going to deliver probably a slightly more serious message. The reason why is this government is in deep and serious trouble. It is falling apart. It is dividing and fracturing. The Conservative Party did that a number of years ago. But it's not just our political parties which are in trouble. It's the country too.
There has been some suspicion of some of these Tory turncoats, including of Nadine Dorries as well, hasn't there, Jack?
Yeah, definitely, and I think there will become a point where reform risks being too saturated by the Tory MPs, or former Tory MPs, who they keep pointing the finger at for the failure of the last 14 years. And yes, it's obviously great to get a scalp, get someone across the floor, punch the bruises of Kemi Badenoch, but there will come a point, I think, where they will need to start saying no to some of these Tory turncoats, because, as I said, Nigel Farage, yes, lots of his criticism is levelled towards the current Labour government, but he really likes to put the boot into the record of the last Conservative government. And so the people that actually helped form those decisions made under Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, welcoming them with open arms, does seem like a bit of a contradiction. So it's obviously good to get a scalp, someone crossing the floor, but I think that speaking to people close to Nigel Farage, it will be a time in the near future where they'll start saying, actually, you know what, sorry, one, you're too late, we don't really want you, and also there will be a sort of an impression that they are just doing it for self-service reasons. They think that if they stand for election again under the Reform banner, they have a better chance of winning. But there's one thing Nigel Farage is not short on, and that's candidates at the moment.
Maybe Nadine Dorries would be sent to the House of Lords and she could stop moaning about not being a baroness. Maybe you could let us know your thoughts now on the reshuffle, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think what I would take from the reshuffle, I think there's two main figures who are really the ones to watch in this, and there's been a lot of commentary about them over the past few hours. The first is Shabana Mahmood, demoting Yvette Cooper from Home Secretary, well, not demoting,
I think it's a demotion. I think that's perfectly right, Jack. I mean, the Foreign Office, okay, it's a great office of state, but it's not being Home Secretary, is it?
No, and even if you don't describe it as a demotion, it is a tacit admission that she has failed in her job over the past year. Doing a reshuffle after a year in government where you're putting people into totally different jobs is not something which most prime ministers would want to do, because they get to grips with the department, they understand the department, and the only reason you would move them after about a year is an admission that they have totally failed. Yvette Cooper is a grandee of the party, so clearly she is going to have some sort of role. A Foreign Office is a role which is very hard to actually That's a very loud.
Hold on a second. We can't hear you, Jack. We can't hear you, Jack. We'll just let the announcement go. What are they talking about? I don't know. There's a very loud. Just take him down just for a second. There's a very loud announcement at Reform UK's conference. We'll go back to Jack in just a second. Are we confident that announcement is over? Do we think? Yeah, let's go back to Jack. Jack, you're drowned out there. This is censorship. I won't have it. You're right in the middle of talking about Yvette Cooper at the Foreign Office there. Go ahead.
It sounded like we were sort of in a World War II Blitz era, where we were sort of having to start scramble to shelters or something. It's very loud. They don't do things by half measures here at Reform.
That's right.
Going back to the reshuffle, Shabana Mahmood is someone, I think, who, despite inheriting a pretty miserable time in prisons and was responsible for letting out prisoners early, I think there is a sense in government that she is a bit of a radical reformer, that she actually, is pretty hardline. Let's not forget, this is the Justice Secretary that wanted to castrate paedophiles, and I think that there is a sense that she is very professional, very radical. She's a close ally of the Prime Minister's pretty right-wing Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. And so I think putting her into that role is a clearer message as any that Keir Starmer sees stopping the boats as crucial to any chance he has at re-election. And I think the second one, Pat McFadden going into the work and pensions brief. Your viewers will remember how very recently the Labour government bottled pretty modest savings in the welfare bill, about £5 billion out of a sickness benefits bill that's meant to rise to about £100 billion by the end of the decade. Liz Kendall, the previous, until yesterday, work and pensions secretary, was blamed for being pretty hapless in the handling of that, botching those savings amid a pretty feeble Labour MP rebellion. And so Pat McFadden, who was the Whitehall fixer, sort of a Mr. Fix-It, as it were, he is going into that department because it seems like they're going to have a second stab at getting down that welfare bill. And I think that, for everyone's sake, Pat McFadden, hopefully, fingers crossed to him, that he manages to get it done this time.
Is Keir Starmer going to get phase 2 back on track, Jack? He's not exactly in a position of strength at the moment, is he?
No, not at all. I mean, yesterday's reshuffle was pretty scrambling in its nature. Obviously, they had to seize the opportunity to do a big reset after Angela Rayner fell on her sword yesterday. But listen, no Prime Minister wants to be reshuffling their government after a year, especially in such big departments. If it was just sort of a slight shuffling of the deck chairs in the lower ranks, then maybe you could say that he was sticking to it. But it's blindingly obvious to any political watcher that things are not going swimmingly at all. They came into government. Didn't really have a plan to hit the ground running. Sue Gray gets a lot of the blame for that, and she's now gone. But while there is a lot of shuffling the deck chairs, the same faces remain in cabinet. We only had 2 people actually sacked, Lucy Powell and Ian Murray. I think it will be interesting. I think today or into the week or over the weekend is the more junior ranks, because there are some holes to be filled lower down the chain, and they might not get the same sort of headlines and facial recognition and time in the airwaves as the main cabinet ministers. But often you promote people in government on the lower ranks who you think might be some mischief makers. So you don't want them on the backbenches, and you want to bring them into line. And this government's going to have a lot of fights in its hands in the next few years. It's going to have big fights on taxes. It's going to have big fights on immigration, big fights on welfare, not just with the opposition parties, but with its own party as well, because Keir Starmer clearly is chasing down those voters who he is bleeding to reform. But that is very unpalatable to lots of people on the soft left of the Labour Party. Look at the welfare rebellion, for example. And so I think maybe pulling some of those people into line, where they have to stick with the party, rather than going their own way on the back benches, could be a way of installing party discipline. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there.
You talk about mischief makers on the back benches. Just before you go, Jack, what do you think the political future of Angela Rayner will be? Will she take some time out now? Will we be hearing a lot more from her, do you think? Could she be a thorn in the side for Keir Starmer?
I think most definitely. Any sense that Angela Rayner will go quietly, I think is probably for the birds. Many voters would rightly expect her to scurry off into the deep freeze with any political ambitions, but to her, pretty big legions of left-wing supporters in both the Parliamentary Labour Party and in the Grassroots Party. She is a martyr, and maybe soon their Red Queen over the water. And you can imagine her becoming the standard bearer of the party's left. It's no secret that she is much further to left than Keir Starmer, and they had a pretty testing forced political marriage. She was obviously the elected deputy leader, so Keir Starmer was stuck with her. But she's long, despite her denials, I think coveted the top job. She's long had sort of outriders in the party rooting for her, and now that she is unshackled from the cabinet collective responsibility and dutifully nodding along with the Prime Minister, actually now she's free to potentially punch some of the bruises. 2-child benefit cap. Will Angela Rayner come out and say that Keir Starmer should scrap it? Any more welfare savings? Will Angela Rayner say that they shouldn't be done? Migration, is she saying that they're going too far to try and chase down those reform voters? You can imagine her being a pretty big pain in the backside.
Jack, thank you very much indeed for your analysis there. Enjoy the rest of Reform UK Conference. I know it's one of at least 4 you're going to: Liberal Democrats, Conservatives and Labour as well. That's Jack Elsom there, who is the political editor of The Sun, joining us. What do you think of all that's happening? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some more calls in just a minute. Just want to play a couple of voice notes. Nick in Loughborough first has some thoughts on Nadine Dorries.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick from Loughborough. I want to talk about Nigel Farage's conference, which seems to be going really great guns. However, I'm really frightened for reform now because they've allowed in Nadine Dorries. Nadine Dorries, who was almost obsequious in her support for Boris Johnson, including his lunacy net zero plans, but also she was a big cheerleader for lockdowns that have put the country in the position that it's now in. And I don't think reform needs throwbacks from a failed Johnson government. Have a good day, Peter.
Nick, thanks for that. And you say almost obsequious to Boris Johnson. I think the word almost is doing quite a lot of work in that sentence. Nick, great message. Ian in East Grinstead.
Hi, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Listening to that clip that Kemi Badenoch you played, claiming that the Tories drove this forward, that's a blatant untruth, isn't it? I think the Telegraph and the journalists actually drove this forward and drove her to her resignation. Nothing to do with the Tories. So, once again, I mean, I might be wrong, you can correct me, but it seems to me like she's claiming glory for something she really wasn't fronting.
I think that's absolutely fair, Ian. I think we've also got to remember Kate Ferguson, the political editor of The Sun on Sunday, who did an awful lot of work on this as well. Big revelations in that paper too. But you're absolutely right about the Telegraph. We can't take anything away from them. David says if free speech is not dead in the UK, then it's definitely in intensive care. Nicola in Norfolk. What do I want the new cabinet to do? I want them to resign en masse and call a general election because they're totally incompetent and have done more damage to this country in the last 14 months than the Tories did in 14 years, says Nicola. Penny in Essex says, well, what a totally untalented bunch we have in power. Not one of them deserves any respect from anyone. Shame on what Britain has been allowed to become. The great from Britain has gone, says Penny. Christina says, what do I want from the Cabinet? Mass resignations. Sue says, the only thing I want from the Cabinet is a resignation, says Sue in West Sussex. So a pretty consistent line there as well. Deborah in Essex says, the reason why Farage will stop the boats in 2 weeks is because once the illegals know Farage is Prime Minister, they will stop coming, just like the illegal immigrants saying they are waiting for Starmer to get in and actually thank Starmer when they landed on our shores. Lots more to come. Get your call and get your voice note in 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
question. But look, we laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Barry is in Norwich and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Barry, you're very welcome to the programme this morning. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter. How are you? Okay?
Yeah, well, thanks.
I'd just like to I was listening to that Labour MP.
Yeah, Darren Paffy, yeah.
And I really do think they live in another planet, a la-la land. My main concerns as a member of the public, a working member of the public, is I want my gas and electric bills to come down, because before the election, Starmer was saying he's going to freeze council tax and he's going to freeze gas.
Well, Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, said bills were going to come down by £300.
And now they've gone up again. I want to see the shopping going down in the basket.
Yeah.
I want to see immigration halted, illegal and legal immigration. I want these hotels shut. Yeah, I want people not being censored and put in prison for speaking online. I want people being arrested by armed police officers off planes. This is some sort of 1984 that I'm living in at the moment, I think. You know, and I don't think Starmer has a mandate to govern this country, because he wants to bring in digital ID stuff. All his manifesto stuff, none of it's there. And it's just been one scandal after the other since they've been in power. Yeah.
Do you think things will get better now there's been a reshuffle, Barry?
No, I don't think things will get better. I think they're going to get even worse. Yeah, right? Because I just think that's like, rearranging the ships on the deck chair. The one thing I was pleased to see yesterday was that Lucy Powell get the boot after saying that it was all dog whistle politics and that sort of stuff when she was commenting on them grooming gangs. They haven't even arranged that, have they, that national inquiry yet? They've done nothing. Do you know what I mean? They've done nothing. Do you know what I mean? They keep going about what the Conservatives done. They've been in power a year, and they're still going on about, well, they left us this and left us that. Get on and do it. So, you've been in power a year. If I start a new job and after a year of being in that job, I'm still moaning about the previous guy who was there before me.
Listen, Barry, I think all those points are very, very valid, and thank you for them. We're going to continue talking about this. Lots of people have reacted to that interview, actually, with the Labour MP, Darren Paffy. He was on a little bit earlier on this programme, and Foster has given his view on this.
Good morning, Peter. I've just listened to that lefty you've just had on from the Labour Party. What a load of nonsense. I would never, ever vote for Labour, ever. I have been a Labour voter, but I would never do it again. Reform all the way from me. And everyone I speak to, everyone, are the same feeling. They all want reform. Labour is dead.
Thank you. Paul in Hartlepool.
Good morning, Peter. Paul up in Hartlepool. Darren, your Labour MP, he must be delusional if he can't see that free speech is under attack in this country in many, many areas. I'll tell you how bad it is. A police car went past us the other day with its blue lights and two-tones on, and my wife turned to me and said, "My goodness me, that must be a dreadful tweet someone has done. I think someone has got to face up to this online safety bill, and our freedom's being taken away from us by this dreadful government." Great show. Thanks very much. Good morning.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning to you. We'll certainly be talking about free speech and Graham Linehan. He is the creator of Father Ted, who was arrested this week. He's given an interview to the Times newspaper, and he says he is moving to Arizona. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the programme. Final voice note for the meantime from Becky in Worcestershire.
Morning, Peter. Becky from Worcestershire here. So what I take from Darren's interview is that politics must be dour. It must be boring. It must be grim. There's no room for hope or fun or, dare I say, a bit of glamour and glitz. And God forbid that you should speak your mind or off the cuff. Heaven help us and protect us from politicians like him. Thanks, Peter.
Becky, thank you. Thanks also to Jason in the Lake District, who says, so Scarlett McGuire earlier on your debate desk sighs when you correctly state that businesses are hammered by the increase in the minimum wage. She simply doesn't understand how much damage this has caused us, like the rest of the lefty loons. That's Jason, who runs a business himself. So thank you for that. Thanks also to John, who says, I'm not convinced Farage wants to be Prime Minister. I think he's happier to push his party's agenda from the sidelines and force the current government to make decisions that they don't necessarily agree with or support. But Sir Keir knows if he doesn't solve major political issues before the next general election, he is going to lose, and they all love power, says John. Thank you to Jane, who says, after the musical chairs yesterday and the cool light of day, it is even worse. None of them is suitable for their new role. It is going to be a further disaster. Gary says, I can't stand all this whataboutery in politics where these scandals surface. The party and government effectively says to the opposition, yes, we are a bunch of crooks and grifters, but so were you when you were in office, as if that makes it all okay. It's almost as if these people forget that the public exists and that we're the ones getting shafted by both of them when they're supposed to be serving us. I think that's a really good message, and there's so much in that, Gary, because if you simply say, oh, well, you're doing what we did previously, or, well, your scandal's not as bad as our scandal, or your scandal's worse than our scandal, well, actually, does that make things better? I think people are sick of all of this. Earl says you don't need any MPs with experience in Parliament. It's simple. They say to the civil service people, do this task or you're fired in 48 hours and 1 minute. Then things will change. David in South Wales. So Rayner gets caught committing £40,000 of tax fraud. In fairness, it's not tax fraud. It is avoidance rather than evasion. And she is still allowed to be a sitting MP in Parliament. No wonder this country is in the mess it's in. One rule for thee, but not for me, says David in South Wales. Leslie says, I am a Reform member, but I'm concerned about Farage's ridiculous statements. Leslie said, to stop the boats, he would have to leave the ECHR first, and that will not happen in 2 weeks. I'm also very concerned that he is trying to copy a fraud like Trump. This will only appeal to a limited number of British people, says Leslie. And finally, Darren in Bristol says Starmer's Labour Party is making the monster raving loony party look like a viable option now. Well, we will go back to Birmingham after the break. James Nation is with us. He's actually a former Conservative, former head of policy for Rishi Sunak at Number 10. He's been on the debate desk with us. He's in Birmingham. I wonder what he makes of the Reform UK conference and, of course, the cabinet reshuffle moves this week. We're asking the question today as well, what do you want from the new cabinet? Give me a ring, send me a voice note, 0344 499 1000, or you can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The King Mike, who's been on Twitter saying Darren Paffey on Peter Cardwell's show says that Angela Rayner leaves behind a fantastic legacy. This is gaslighting. Angela Rayner was caught not paying the correct tax on a house purchase. How is that a fantastic legacy? Thanks to everybody on Twitter who has been in touch as well. Yeah, I mean, there are lots and lots of different views coming in, including from Darren in Bristol, who, well, I've actually read that one out. Right, let's go to Birmingham, and David Bull, late of this parish, is actually on stage at the moment. He is now the chairman of Reform UK, so we're going to hear a little bit of what he has to say before we speak to James Nation, who is the former head of policy for Rishi Sunak. Let's hear a little bit of what David Bull is saying.
They are also changing their local areas. We've also got some fantastic speeches to come from Alex Wilson, of course, doing sterling work in the London Assembly, our member of the London Assembly. Sarah Pochin MP, our MP for Runcorn and Helsby, will be with us. And I've also got something of a surprise because we have consultant cardiologist Aseem Malhotra. He will be here, yes, talking about how we make Britain healthy again, something I'm incredibly passionate about. Talking of surprises, we also have a huge surprise for you. A very, very special guest will be joining a conference edition of the Daily Telegraph's Planet Normal podcast. It will be hosted by Alison Pearson, who you saw yesterday, and Liam Halligan as well this afternoon. I don't want to overemphasize this, but this is something that everyone will be talking about. Every single national newspaper will be talking about it, and this is something you cannot afford to miss. We will tell you a little more in just a moment. After that, it will be followed by an uplifting speech from my friend and deputy leader, Richard Tice, and our leader, Nigel Farage, will close our 2025 conference.
That's David Bull there, who is the chairman of Reform UK, just saying what's coming up at the conference. We'll bring you, of course, lots of coverage between now and 1 o'clock on this station. Let's go to another part of the conference hall. James Nation is standing by. James Nation, OBE, former head of policy for Rishi Sunak. James, you've been a stalwart of the Conservative Party, of course. Now you're at a Reform UK conference. What are your impressions?
Well, firstly, good morning, Peter. Good morning, everyone. So just behind me shortly, you're going to see people queuing to get one of those Reform football shirts signed by Nigel Farage. So look, there is a definite buoyancy and energy here. That was clear in the conference hall yesterday, both outside but also in the main hall where all the speeches were given. So there's a definite mood that, look, we're the ones on the up, we've got the energy. You can even tell that in the playlist, Peter. But there are some interesting features as well that I observed in what Farage has said and what people are talking about here. The first is really trying to get that dividing line with the Labour Party going ahead of a general election, which Farage was speculating can come in 2027. Of course, that's Keir Starmer's decision, not his. But really trying to say, you know, the Labour movement now, they are about to go into some big, deep splits as a party. Then also the other thing I'd just say, Peter, is, and I think some of your callers have picked up on this earlier today, a little bit of a nod towards people being a bit more interested in sort of, you know, the answer to what are you going to do? Are you guys credible? And just starting to pay attention to that. So I'll give you one example. Farage in his speech yesterday said, I'm going to be setting out some cuts to welfare. We'll obviously see the detail, but to me that was just a bit of, hang on a minute, I get that if I want to show I'm serious here, I'm going to need to confront some trade-offs and show that I'm willing to make a difficult decision to get to grips with the country's finances. Let's see, of course, but that's my impression so far.
James, really interesting impressions there. Also, you were Rishi Sunak's policy chief. You know all about how difficult it is to get things through and to make things happen. When Nigel Farage says, I'm going to stop the boats in 2 weeks, is that a realistic thing?
Not realistic in terms of a time frame, Peter. I mean, you know, if we play his policy through and there's the complex unravelling of our membership of the ECHR, other international conventions, scaling up deportation capacity, detention centres, the infrastructure to actually have that deterrent in place to remove people who are here illegally, that takes time. Look, there's no denying that you could actually have a strong message early on and a sign of intent to try and deter people from making that perilous crossing across the channel. But there has to be a bit of a realism here that you would be gearing the British state towards doing something quite big, quite significant. And you can't do that in a few weeks. But you can definitely show you're serious.
Of course, many people want that to happen and want that to happen quickly, but it's a matter of whether it can. In your estimation, I mean, Nigel Farage will talk about the blob, as Michael Gove did as well. Is some of it just going to be obstruction from a civil service if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister? Or, I mean, the things you're talking about there are clearly taking a long time to do anyway, just even in terms of legislation. But certainly, will there be resistance, do you think, to Nigel Farage as Prime Minister?
Look, the civil servants I work with, Peter, were extremely dedicated, and I never saw any of this deep state conspiracy stuff that occasionally creeps up now and again. That said, you know, when we were introducing, albeit as we've talked about before, we didn't see the flights take off, but when we were introducing the Rwanda scheme, we did have to make certain changes to the law to ensure that civil servants would be instructed. And I think there should just be a sense in Whitehall at the moment that, to your point, consistently British voters are saying that they want this issue addressed and a different solution. And I think you should be gearing up towards being able to respond to that. And quite an interesting example, I think you saw recently the head of the Foreign Office write to civil servants in the Foreign Office saying if you disagree with the government's stance on Israel, the option available to you is always to resign.
Yeah.
You know, your job is to follow the instructions of the elected government of that day. So for sure, there'll be challenges. I should just say from my experience, though, the people I work with, Peter, were dedicated. They were just after direction. They were just after politicians setting out what they actually want to do and achieve. They wanted clarity. That was the key thing.
And I would agree with that with the civil servants I worked with in 3.5 years. 95% of whom I would say would fall into that category. Some of them didn't, but the vast majority did. James, we're just going to play a little clip now from Nadine Dorries, late of the Conservative Party, now of Reform UK. This is what she told Reform UK conference yesterday.
Why? And I'm going to deliver probably a slightly more serious message. The reason why is this government is in deep and serious trouble. It is falling apart. It is dividing and fracturing. The Conservative Party did that a number of years ago. But it's not just our political parties which are in trouble. It's the country too.
Nadine Dorries, the latest Tory turncoat moving to Reform UK. James, there are quite a few people, including Sir Jake Berry. I know you used to work with him as well. There are quite a few Conservatives moving towards Reform UK. What do you make of their motives in order to do so? Are they simply saying, this is the way forward, I want to join a political party? Are they saying, my party's left me, the Conservatives have changed, therefore I want to stay true to my values and go to Reform UK? Or is it just naked political opportunism, do you think?
Combination of all of the above, probably, Peter. So I don't doubt that there's some very real disillusionment with the Tory party following on from what happened last year and also some developments since and how hard it's been for them to get purchase in a fragmented political environment. And you can see maybe with how broad the Tory coalition ended up after 14 years, you can see that fracturing and you can see maybe why some people are drawn towards the Reform flame. But of course, another reason for being drawn towards that flame is power. Let's be real about it. There will be some people who'll be thinking, do you know what, I fancy that mayoral race in a few years or months' time, and maybe my prospects are better in teal than they are in blue at the moment. So let's not pretend that this is 100% pure Damascene conversions for people. There'll be calculations, it's politics about power as always, but it just shows us how difficult that debate on the right of British politics is still, and you can see and hear that playing out here as well at Reform Conference.
You're a former Conservative special advisor to Rishi Sunak. You're at the Reform UK conference. Are you thinking of changing from blue to teal?
Oh, no, Peter. Look, these days I'm very happy working as an impartial observer and consultant of these things. But no, I was delighted to get the opportunity to work for Rishi, as I've said to you before, and did my best working for the Tory party. Will always, have an affection for the Tory party still. So no, not for me. And these days, I think my time in politics is probably over, Peter. Just here observing things, trying to make sense of it with people like yourself.
In regard to some of the different policies that have been made, we've talked about the boats as well, those kind of compromises perhaps on welfare. It's interesting because, of course, they say that you campaign in poetry and govern in prose. As you said a bit earlier in this interview, there may well be trouble ahead there. The kind of scrutiny that Reform UK is getting as well. We've seen the front page of the Mirror newspaper as well, talking about Nigel Farage as what they argue is a stamp duty hypocrite. That's been rubbished by Richard Tice this morning. But we're Reform UK moving into a very different phase now, I think, as the polls certainly have them way ahead and looking like the next party of government. Do you see a shift in terms of how the sort of political class is treating them, to say nothing of the fact that I know ambassadors have been to the Reform UK conference? We've seen lots of big businesses there as well. Reform UK are being taken seriously, aren't they?
Yes, I think certainly people think they are worth engaging with and scrutinising, to your point. And what's interesting for me is they know that. And that goes back to my point earlier around Farage's language on welfare, around, I think, what you were seeing. I don't think any Reform figure would describe it as what I'm about to say, but a pivot away from that manifesto, that large shopping list that they had for the last election. They are sort of trying to move slowly away from that and paint more in generalities that they think are going to be well received by the public and also the markets as well, right? So being able to say, we realise we need to do or take further action on the affordability of the state pension age, for instance, when we raise that. We need to pursue welfare savings. Just moving away, Peter, from specifics where it is easy for Westminster think tanks and others to say, oh, that's got a 15 billion price tag attached, how are you going to fund it? But the one thing I would say is this, and I think you get a sense of this from your callers, we're just not in the phase at the moment, I think, where Reform give a specific policy, they can't say how they'll pay for it, and they necessarily get punished for that. It's all about vibes at the moment. That's the problem. That's the real challenge for both the major parties here. How do you actually get the public to focus on the specific trade-offs involved with what Nigel Farage and Reform want to do, when at the moment he's still able to get away with painting in primary colours, as you say. But let me just end where I started. There is definitely a shift underway where Reform know that eye is turning on to them, that scrutiny eye is turning on to them, and just watch what their senior politicians and senior figures say. They're getting smarter with some of their interventions, knowing that they've got to try and hit a bit of a credibility tune.
James, just finally, I mean, this is kind of a big question, but I wonder if you think the era of two-party politics in this country is dead, because we've got Jeremy Corbyn's as yet unnamed party polling at around 10%. That would be a real problem for the Labour Party. We've got Reform UK in the most recent poll at 32%, 10 points ahead of Labour. There isn't an election tomorrow, but there will be one probably, well, Nigel Farage thinks in 2 years' time, possibly in about 3.5 years' time. We're really seeing the sand shifting in terms of where people are putting their crosses in those boxes at the moment, aren't we?
We are, Peter. I do think, though, that is a very hard question to give you a definitive answer on, as you'll know. I mean, your viewers will know this. Just look at what's happened in these last few years. I mean, in 2021, Keir Starmer nearly resigned, and then he wins the election that he won last year. We also had the election in 2019 where the vote share for both major parties was strong, albeit people will recall that is, some would argue, because Nigel Farage arguably, stood a lot of people down privately to allow Boris Johnson free rein in many constituencies. So for sure there is a fragmentation going on, and you're seeing this with the fact that it is enough for Reform to be polling at the 30% mark, and if that were to be translated into a general election result, Nigel Farage could plausibly have a path to a majority. So that just shows you how fragmented things are. But things can always change, Peter, can't they? Events, dear boy, events. Something external could come into the mix that could help the incumbent government out, or maybe the other way. We just don't know. I would just say this, though, it's the most volatile that I think most political observers our age have seen it for quite some time, and who knows what happens next.
next.
James, thank you for all of that analysis, and particularly for saying that I'm your age. That's James Nation, OBE there. He's a former head of policy for Rishi Sunak. Enjoy the rest of conference there, James, and thank you for that. We'll take a lot more of your thoughts on all of that. If you want to react to anything James Nation was saying there, give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. Thanks to Adrian in Woking. He says, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I believe that if we rescind Blair's Human Rights Act, that forces us to accept the supremacy of the ECHR. Then, like so many European countries, we can simply ignore the diktats of the ECHR. Well, listen, I know there are some top lawyers on the case for Reform UK. We'll see what they end up doing if they make it to government, which the polls certainly indicate they will. John in Norwich says, looking at the Reform Conference, it is so obvious Farage has taken the Trump doctrine fully on board. Anne says, which government is that? Do you mean the puppets that are told what to do at every turn by their handlers? It's all a game, as David Cameron once said. Time we had a real government who do what the people who put them there want. Rob says, I interpreted Nigel's claim to stop the boats in 2 weeks like this. When he comes to power, he immediately builds detention centres and arrests anyone entering illegally. If this is well published online, people will stop coming. That's Rob in Halkin there. And Jackie says, I think anyone in government and power needs to take responsibility, be held accountable for the decisions they make. If they were, they would think more carefully, and so mistakes wouldn't be made. We all take responsibility in our daily lives. If we make a mistake, it's our fault, nobody else's. And Glyn in Rotherham, just before the break, says, how difficult can it be in government? All you do is ask the civil servants and then they do the opposite. Best regards, Glyn in Rotherham. Well, thanks for that. Lots more comments coming your way. We'll take calls and voice notes next here on Talk.
Of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one, and the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Leslie, who says Nigel could stop the boats in 2 weeks. Look how Rwanda sent migrants to Ireland, not forgetting migrants waiting for a Starmer government. Farage having immediate detention is a deterrent. Mike in St Albans has some views on this. We're going to drill down a little bit more into this with Robert Bates, the migration expert, in just a few minutes. But first of all, let's talk to Mike in St Albans. Mike, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yes, good morning, Peter.
Hiya.
As regards Nigel, I think it's perfectly feasible that he would be able to stop the votes within 2 weeks. As he just commented there, first of all, he would reignite the Rwanda. I know that would clash with certain aspects of the ECHR. There's many countries in Europe that actually do ignore certain aspects of the...
Oh, they do, and we did as well, Mike. We ignored the ECHR when the court said that prisoners had to have the vote. David Cameron just said, we're not doing it, we're not going to do that, just ignore them.
I remember that well. That well, and they were perfectly right to actually reject that aspect as well, giving them the prisoners a vote. So that's by the by. In the meantime, I think what Nigel would do, it would be a temporary thing, obviously, in Rwanda. He would then... make sure where Scranton slipped up, which they did, right? I think he would take over MOD properties. They would be converted into reception cum processing centres.
Yep.
Right? The boats the deterrent would be there. They would be stopped. They would not want to come within 2 weeks if they knew they were going to either go to Rwanda or a processing reception centre.
Yes.
Right, okay. But these reception centres would be controlled. They would be inmates there until their processes for applications have been done. Right? Now that could, if they were told that the new ones coming over would have to take their turn in the queue, and it could be anything up to 6 months or even a year.
Yeah.
Believe you me, the votes would stop within a fortnight, Peter. And I'm pretty sure that somewhere along the line, that's where Nigel's thinking is going.
Well, we will see what happens, Mike. It'll be absolutely fascinating to watch. Thanks for your call.
I think it's going to be fascinating, Peter. I really do.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. Sorry, Mike, did you have a final point there? I don't mean to cut you off.
Taking my call.
Okay, all good, all good. Thanks, Mike. Much appreciated. Let's hear a voice note from Sandra in Essex.
Hi, Peter. It's Sandra from Essex. Your guest, Mr. Paffy, is it, the Labour MP? In complete denial, like most of the Labour government, in denial about the state of his party and the state of the country. But very soon he's going to get a big wake-up call. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Quite a few people reacting to what Darren Paffy said. Terry Bowman on Twitter says the continuing list of UK Labour apologists for Angela Rayner is staggering, and all of them praising her for being such a towering political personality. Another person says, free breakfast clubs? Wow, not free working taxpayers' money. People should feed their own kids. Christopher says, populism doing a lot of heavy lifting in Darren Paffy's replies earlier, and desperately trying to portray Keir Starmer as a man of the people, peak delusion and sucking up. Angela says, Darren Paffy, this is the Labour MP we spoke to a bit earlier on in the programme, obviously as Nigel Farage living in his head, saying Keir Starmer doesn't fawn over Donald Trump is laughable. Why even talk about Nigel? This was a discussion about Labour failures, and Lucy Connolly did not call for migrant hotels to be burnt down. Outrageous lies from this MP, says Angela. Bob says the impression I get is that sacking Ian Murray is a very bad move. That's the Scotland Secretary until yesterday. He is pretty highly thought of up here, as is Douglas Alexander, but how he did it by phone is not a good look either. Well, yes, Douglas Alexander 20 years ago under Tony Blair was Scotland Secretary. Now he is again. A couple of people taking me to task over tax avoidance versus evasion. Well, Henry says surely it is evasion, not avoidance, if she got to pay it back. Avoidance would be if she legitimately arranged her affairs to minimise the bill. And Gary's been in touch on that point as well. Says, Peter, why are you calling what Labour did avoidance? Tax avoidance is the legitimate use of tax laws to reduce your tax liability. If she'd done that, there wouldn't be a problem. What she did was not pay tax that she was legally required to pay by being economical with the truth. That's not tax avoidance, that's tax evasion. It even doesn't matter if she did it out of ignorance, although that's pretty hard to believe given that she initially said she had taken legal advice that apparently now doesn't seem to exist. It's still tax evasion. Remember, ignorance is not a defence, particularly for the Housing Secretary, says Gary. Well, I'm not implying that Angela Rayner has done anything illegal. She's paying back the money. These mistakes, well, it's much more than a mistake. It's a heck of a lot more than a mistake, and it is hypocrisy. And it's right that she's gone. We're going to talk more about Reform UK. We're going to talk more about Angela Rayner and that pledge to stop the boats in 2 weeks. Do you think Nigel Farage can do it? Do you agree with what Mike in St Albans there was saying earlier on? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, and we'll take more of your calls in the next hour. Stay with us.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Angela Rayner's gone, there's a new cabinet, and Nigel Farage says he can stop the boats within 2 weeks. It's been a very dramatic political week, let me tell you. We're getting through all of it, getting all your comments on the air between now and 1 o'clock. We're going to talk to Robert Bates, the migration expert, in just a second about whether Nigel Farage's claim is credible. Also about Shabnam Mahmood, who is the new Home Secretary. Is she the right person to stop the boats? Can she do that? And what's she like as a politician? We'll talk to Graham Stringer as well, the Labour MP many of you actually like, about the deep doo-doo that Keir Starmer has been in this week and how he has got through it. Lots to discuss. I want to make sure you get on the air. Let's hear your voice. 0344 499 1000 to give me a ring, or for voice notes you can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, you can send me a voice note. Keep it to less than a minute, otherwise Tech Up Dave gets very annoyed and becomes Tetchy Up Dave, and we don't want that. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message, or send me or pick up the phone. Give me a ring. Let's have a chat on the air. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Ian Collins is actually here tomorrow between 10 and 1. I'm taking a rare day off, but I'm back on Friday. Drive is a little bit different this week, and Petri Hoskin is doing Drive on Monday. Jeremy is doing Drive Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'll be back on Friday, and then the weekend shows next week. So after 1 o'clock, it'll be 4 o'clock on Friday before you see me next, just taking a few days off. It's been very busy over the summer. Lots to discuss today, though. It's been a very busy summer politically, as well as barely abated all of this, of course, Angela Rayner, the reshuffle sparked by the fact that she had to resign after giving this interview to Sky News earlier in the week.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people, but because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Well, a very different Angela Rayner, I think, to what we're used to. She's usually very combative, very confident there. She was pretty demure in what she was saying, a real lack of confidence, I think. I think she was very worried at that point, of course, and well, she might have been, because she had to resign on Friday. Then we had a big reshuffle. That's led to all sorts of changes, including a new Home Secretary in Shabana Mahmood. We'll talk about her in a second, and how she would deal with the boats issue and immigration in general. Interestingly, at the same time in Birmingham, we've been in Birmingham a couple of times earlier in the programme, talking to people there, including the political editor of The Sun, Jack Elsom. Nigel Farage yesterday bringing forward his speech. It was meant to be kind of late afternoon, between 4 and 5, and actually he brought it to about 1:15. And this is what he said specifically about stopping the boats. He says he can do it really quickly.
We will stop what is a threat to our national security, what is a danger to girls and women on our streets. We will stop the boats, and we will detain and deport those who illegally break into our country, doing what nearly every normal country around the rest of the world does. You cannot come here illegally and stay. We will stop the boats within 2 weeks of winning government.
Nigel Farage thinks he can do that. We spoke to Rishi Sunak's former head of policy at Number 10, who says that's impossible within the system as it stands, but maybe Nigel Farage would change the system. Robert Bates is with us. He's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Do you think it's actually possible to stop the boats in 2 weeks? Is that policy-wise, governmentally, politically possible? And maybe, I suppose, if you send a signal that what's happening, well, maybe the migrants will think in a different way and go to other places. What do you make of this?
So the actual plans that would be put in place in terms of the detention and the deportation would obviously take a lot longer than the 2 weeks to get fully up and running and to actually start to be seen to have an impact. I think what Reform are trying to go down is actually the sort of softer sort of effects with this tough rhetoric and the deliverance of a message, which, and we know that this is something that the Labour Party are attempting to do as well, kind of sending that message, broadcasting, putting those adverts out, so that potential would-be migrants are sort of seeing the prospect and what the likelihood of being able to stay in Britain is. So I think that's sort of what they're basing probably the 2-week claim on, is this kind of, well, that we're speaking tough and therefore that message will filter through. When it comes to their actual detention and deportation plan, but that will obviously take slightly longer. I think, you know, the constitutional reforms alone will take a while to force through the House of Lords and Parliament. But and then obviously detention facilities as well will take a period of time to construct. But I think what they've done is they've set out a sort of rough blueprint. Obviously, there are a lot more details that we need to see on the operational side of things. Constitutionally, they're in the right place. But I think that the messaging there is likely on the basis that if you do talk tough and people do actually believe, would-be migrants do actually believe what you're saying, then there is a likelihood that there will be some impact on the flows. Although, you know, ending it completely in 2 weeks, I think might be a bit of a reach. But I think, you know, the statement of intent is a very important factor in this.
What do you read into the fact that Nigel Farage has put Zia Youssef, the former party chairman, he's now head of policy and will lead a new department for preparing for government having a plan, which is something that Labour were certainly accused of not having 14 months ago. Do you think Reform UK, specifically on the issue of immigration, can actually prepare as much as they can? We know the civil service won't talk to an incoming government until at least, well, maximum 6 months before an election, at the earliest, I should say, 6 months before an election. But clearly, Nigel Farage, Zia Youssef and others feel that on immigration and many other matters, they can get their ducks in a row well in advance of that.
Yeah, I think if they're, if the policy unit that Zia Youssef ends up running is one that sort of reaches out to individuals in the sort of right-wing ecosphere, there's a lot of intellectual thought on this issue at the moment going on, and there's a lot of brilliant legal minds doing the appropriate work. We saw papers such as those by the Prosperity Institute setting out, how you go about leaving the ECHR, other people doing work on sort of the operational side of things. I think if they're prepared to sort of not do it all in-house and actually listen to the sort of the advice that they receive from other people, then I think they could very well end up on day one with an appropriate set of measures that need to be taken. If they can talk to former immigration advisors, former heads of border force, all of whom are sort of chomping at the bit to actually provide insight either to the Reform or the Tory party, then I think they can really sort of get a sense of how things will work. Of course, they're not really able to get in under the bonnet, as it were, but I think they can get a pretty good sense pretty early on. But it does depend on whether they are prepared to reach out and bring in people from outside to discuss how that would go about.
Yeah, it's interesting, certainly, that we have quite an awful lot. He says, this commits him to resolving one of the most challenging issues for Labourers and Conservatives within a fortnight. We've had a couple of people saying, the political editor of The Sun and a former head of policy to Rishi Sunak, maybe he would say this anyway, James Nation, who was on earlier on, saying that this sounds to him a bit like Nigel Farage talking about this in the way that Donald Trump talked about ending the Ukraine war within 24 hours, that actually the nitty-gritty of governing is much more difficult than actually saying you'll do something.
There is that, and that is obviously an element that an insurgent party would always be sort of chastised for. But I do also think that there is a negotiating tactic whilst unveiling policies as well. You're not just setting out what you intend to do, you are also trying to put in place some of the measures and create some effects, some ripple effects that you think would actually help you to that end as well. And it's a difficult balancing act. For instance, I think the Reform Party have kind of been criticised for not including where they'd put their detention facilities, for instance. But the argument is, well, if we start sort of unveiling that now, then you have opportunity for local sort of left-wing groups to organise and to start protesting and to sort of put flies in the ointment before we've even got going. So there's a balancing act that needs to take place here, and I think I in particular, someone that likes policy, would like to see more of what they plan to do. But I think they're sort of having to strike this tone of we will do this, and I think at the moment most people probably look at the mess that the Conservatives and the Labour Party made when it came to immigration and thinking, well, I do trust what the Reform parties are saying. I do think that they probably do mean what they are trying to do, and whether or not they're actually giving enough for people in the commentariat will to actually believe them as well is a different matter. But I think that the public clearly do think that these are the people that have a plan to fix this crisis.
I want to talk a bit about Shabana Mahmood. She is the new Home Secretary. She's moved from being Justice Secretary to Home Secretary. There are quite a few of our viewers and listeners who have some concerns about her. I'll ask you your thoughts in a second, but this is what Shabana Mahmood said a number of years ago about her Muslim faith and how it is so important to her.
Islam, my own religion, like a lot of practicing Muslims, my faith is the most important thing in my life. It is the absolute driver of everything that I do. I feel a very strong calling of my own conscience, and my conscience calls me to God. That is how
I have absolutely no concerns about someone who's being a Muslim being Home Secretary. I'm much more concerned about what she'll do as Home Secretary. There are people who don't like the religion of Islam and say that's a very big issue and that's something that they care about. What sort of a job do you think she will do, Robert, based on what she has done at Justice? And what are your general thoughts in regard to the appointment of Shabana Mahmood, especially when it comes to immigration?
So on the big issue of the ECHR, she was, whilst in Justice, clearly talking a lot about reforming certain provisions in it and actually making potentially easier to remove those that are here illegally, although that probably is a bit pie in the sky thinking to think that just a few tinkering with it would actually solve the problem. So she clearly was trying to talk as tough as you're able to within the Labour Party, and that is the problem, that the Labour Party, whoever they put in as Home Secretary, is fundamentally constrained by the fact that you have sort of rafts of individuals on the back benches that are just completely wedded to the human rights framework, the existing asylum framework, and therefore any sort of meaningful reform will be very difficult. And of course, she's had a very difficult first day so far already. It's looking like 600 people will be coming across. And I really don't think actually sort of rearranging the deck chairs too much is going to bring significant results.
It's not exactly a ringing endorsement of the job that Yvette Cooper did, is it, Robert?
No, but I think Yvette Cooper was definitely sort of presiding over a bit of chaos. I think we ended up with the Home Office effectively just coming up with tiny piecemeal little efforts and gimmicks in an attempt to look like they were trying to clamp down on the small boats crisis. And of course, 40% up on this time last year, it wasn't working. So I think if Starmer had kept Yvette Cooper around for much longer, I think it would have probably looked like this was a government that had just given up trying to solve the crisis. So I guess sort of a fresh face, it maybe looks like they've got a new plan.
Shabana Mahmood does seem to be more hard line than Yvette Cooper. She seems to be a bit more of a doer.
Oh, no, I agree that her rhetoric in terms of the ECHR and in terms of sort of, when she was taking on the Sentencing Council and what have you is a bit more assertive. But I do just think that the framework within which most Labour front benches operate is one that is not anywhere near enough and sort of radical enough to actually transform the structures that are currently causing this country a lot of harm. So, the rhetoric, again, might actually disconnect further from what is accomplishable by a Labour government, because I just don't think that they can do anything with where their support comes from at the moment, with the sort of current crisis they're getting on their left flank as well. They can do anything anywhere near enough to actually fix this crisis in the next couple of years.
Well, it'll be really, really interesting to see what happens. Robert, thank you as always. Robert Bates, their Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Ernie's been in touch and says, Peter, the only way Farage could stop the boats in 2 weeks would be to call a state of national emergency and deploy the Navy to stop any boats entering British waters at any cost. There's no other way to do it that quickly other than to start a trade war with France unless they stop the boats. Debbie says, surely, but the discussion has to be about whether Farage can stop the boats in 2 weeks. That is a bit condescending to us. We know it's the threat factor that will stop the boats in 2 weeks. Obviously, he can't do the operational parts in 2 weeks. We understand you, Nigel. That is why you are so popular, says Debbie. Angie didn't pay the correct tax, so surely she should be made an example of by HMRC. Labour like making examples of people, so King Charlie should be getting a staff to look into all of her transactions, says another person. Nicola in Norfolk says Farage's claim about stopping the boats in 2 weeks doesn't have to be all about unpicking the ECHR, which will of course be difficult and take time. He'd very quickly stop some of the pull factors which aren't related to the ECHR as soon as the types of freebies and support which are not available in other European countries are stopped. Then I have no doubt that it will reduce the flow of illegals coming across the channel, says Nicola. Mark in Hartlepool says that MP said they're now in phase 2, but I didn't explain what phase 1 was and what phase 2 is. It can only get worse, says Mark in Hartlepool. And Anne says, hear to Nick regarding Nadine Dorries as a Reform UK member. I see her as a self-serving fly in the ointment, not to be trusted, says Anne. Well, Anne, I wonder what you and other Reform UK members think about the fact that Nadine Dorries, Nigel Farage started his conference speech, he stopped it, brought on Nadine Dorries, she said a few things, then she went off and he came on and continued his speech. So clearly she is, quite literally at the centre of things. What do you make of the fact that Nadine Dorries, Sir Jake Berry, Mark O'Longy, other Conservatives are joining Reform UK, are defecting? Are they people who really believe in what Reform UK is doing? Or are they just saying, well, look, the only way back to Parliament is going to be being a Reform UK MP? Do they really believe it? Are you suspicious of them? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. I'd also be very, very interested to hear what you think about the fact that we've just been told that Lucy Connolly is going to appear on stage at the Reform Party conference before Nigel Farage closes the event. This is the woman who, of course, sent a tweet for which she was jailed 31 months for incitement of violence, which she pleaded guilty to. Lots of people feel that she shouldn't have gone to jail at all. I'm one of them. I think a caution would have been absolutely fine. I don't think people should be jailed for their tweets. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on in regard to Graham Linehan as well. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. He's given an interview to The Times today where he says that he's moving to Arizona. He's leaving Britain because of how he was treated, of how he was arrested by 5 officers this week. He says that free speech is dead in this country. It's alive and well here at the home of free speech on Talk, and you can have your say. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Captain. But look, we laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the texter who says, isn't Rayner being fined as well as having to pay £40,000? If so, that must mean a fine and would suggest evasion. She wouldn't be fined or even paying it all if she had avoided the tax. That's a fair point. And Bill in Angus has a point to make on Angela Rayner's resignation and what happens now. This is what
Hi,
Bill
Peter.
says.
Great show as usual. Bill from Angus here. One question I'd like answered, that because Angela Rayner was allowed to resign rather than be sacked, how much is she going to get out of this? Will she get the golden goodbye and all the rest of it? Maybe you can answer that one. Thanks, Pete. Bye.
Bill, thank you. Yes, she will get a payoff. That will happen. That'll be calculated on how much she's paid. She, of course, had lots of different jobs, so got a higher salary than many people. I think she might have actually been paid more than the Prime Minister. I think that is possible, given that she had lots of extra jobs. I'm sure there'll be a Sunday newspaper that will be tallying it up, probably the Sunday Times and the Mail on Sunday. And Ian Collins, of course, will cover that tomorrow. I don't have the figures on top of my head, but I do know that whether you're, avoiding tax, whether you're resigned because you have cancer, whether you've been in a sexual relationship with a goat, no matter why you leave the government, you always get a payoff, and that is the case and has been legally since 1982. So I do think that she will get a payoff, and we'll see what happens there. Matthew in Cheshire is with us and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Matthew, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. What a great show. I've been listening from the start. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, I'm a delivery driver, and I've been listening. I talk to people all day long. These MPs saying they're listening to the people. What planet are they on? I speak to people everywhere, and no one is happy with the government. No one is going to ever vote Labour again. I'm on an estate now. I can see Union Jacks flying everywhere. I deliver to terrace streets. Every terrace street I live on, there's at least one HMO being developed at the moment, and people are up in uproar with it because whether they're working people or it's immigrants, everyone's had enough. They don't want to know it because we're all paying for our back teeth.
Well, you're absolutely right, Matthew, and I think you're absolutely right about those houses of multiple occupancy as well, because if they think the hotels were an issue, well, the HMOs are going to be, I think, perhaps even a bigger issue, Matthew. What do you think?
I don't want to cross the road from our house where I live, and they're all doing the standard practice. They're ripping it to bare bones and completely converting it to 6 or 7 people to live in these houses. I've got a 16 and a 9-year-old daughter, and as a dad and as a veteran, I'm worried. I'm concerned for our children. I need a hip replacement. I got a consultation last week. I said, "Oh, you'll get a letter through. Do you know when the next appointment is?" June next year, just to go for another consultation. The country's a mess. The Tories are dead. The Labour are dead. The only people who are going to make this change is Farage and the reform. This is bigger than what the poll tax was. It's just going to happen. And listening to talk radio, I wish more people would listen to you because it's opening the eyes of me to me what's going on in this country. It's an absolute disgrace. And our MPs are so deluded and so far away from what's going on. All these people are now coming into like Epping and that. The people didn't see it, but there's nowhere for them to go, so it's getting pushed onto the middle class and working people. And we don't want it anymore. We don't want to pay for it anymore. It's got to stop. And the country's bankrupt. The National Health Service is bankrupt. It's a disgrace, and now we're going to get taxed to death. When Keir Starmer got voted in, I said, God help us, absolutely God help us, and it's bleeding right. And I think Farage is right. I do think there'll be a general election in 2 years' time, and we need saving because if we don't, we're in big trouble, really big trouble. The world is laughing at us, Peter.
Matthew, thanks so much for your call. You've illustrated so many points very, very well there, and I really appreciate it. I wish you well with your hip as well. Thank you for serving our country as a veteran. I think Matthew just speaks for so many people in terms of the frustration he feels. You know, he's a delivery driver. He's out there every day doing a job, doing good, honest work. He's served our country as a veteran, and he's worried about the house across the street. He's worried about his taxes. He's worried about his hip replacement. I mean, this is just... I mean, Matthew's a great guy, and I don't want to patronise him, but he's an ordinary, normal person doing a good job that needs to happen in this country. He's a delivery driver. We all need things delivered. He's doing the right thing, and he's just being screwed. And that's how so many people feel. Thank you, Josh, who says, this is not the country my great-grandfather fought for. Labour need to make things right and call a snap election because we fought hard to be a free country and now we're in a dictatorship. Well, a Labour MP, Graham Stringer, who's someone a lot of our viewers and listeners actually like hearing from and thinks speaks a lot of common sense, he's going to join us in a second. I wonder what he makes of the reshuffle this week and what might happen next. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's got in touch. I'm going to go to your calls, your voice notes and your messages in just a second. But first I want to speak to Graham Stringer MP. He is a Labour MP, but he is nonetheless, unlike most Labour MPs, one you like hearing from because he does speak a lot of common sense. He's a Labour MP for Blackley and Middleton South. Graham, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
What do you make of this week of Angela Rayner resigning, of the cabinet reshuffle? Where are we politically, do you think? Where is the Labour Party at 28 minutes past 12 on this Saturday?
I think the cabinet reshuffle and Angela's resignation was an opportunity to realign the government to the wishes of the British people in a way that sadly I don't think it has been over the last 12 months. The government has not done as well as I would like it to do over the last 12 months or so. I think there is one hope in there that I think Yvette Cooper, the previous Home Secretary, failed to stop the boats, which is one of the two huge issues facing the country. And I hope Shahban Mahmood gets the support from the Prime Minister to take the actions that are necessary, which is to make sure that anybody thinking of coming to this country in a small boat knows that they're not going to be given asylum. That certainly means getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights, and it means taking action like Denmark has taken, which has reduced its illegal migration problem to as near as you can get to zero. So I think that's one. I think moving Shabana there is a good thing. She's a toughie. It's just whether she gets the support from the Prime Minister.
Well, that's the point though, Graham, isn't it? I want to go into your other points in just a second, but I just wonder, you know, it's all very well putting someone who is a toughie, as you say, someone in the Home Office who will face down a lot of the institutional resistance, will face down other members of the Labour Party and drive this through. But actually, will she get the support from number 10, do you think, that she needs? And indeed the support from members of the Labour Party and backbenchers? You would support it, of course, but many of your colleagues may not.
I think the key question is whether Keir has moved her there for window dressing or whether it's a real change in the determination to do something about what is the electorate's, or one of the two electorate's main issues. So I suspect the Parliamentary Labour Party would support her if she started making progress in stopping the illegal migration to this country.
What do you think are the other major issues that need to be dealt with?
Well, the major issue is the economy, and this was an opportunity for the Prime Minister to change energy policy. We have the highest energy prices for industry and commerce in the world, not just in Europe, in the world, and there is no need for that. Some of it follows from voluntary decisions taken by the government to load costs onto energy prices, and the ordinary domestic consumer is paying about the 4th highest prices in the world. So we're not going to get the economy moving. We're not going to get the support of people who used to support the Labour Party if we don't sort that basic problem out. And I don't criticise individuals, but Ed Miliband is wedded to the policies is being pursued, and he will resist doing what I think are the sensible things.
On those sensible things, of course, you've outlined. Just in regard to immigration, Nigel Farage says he can stop the boats in 2 weeks. What do you make of that claim?
I don't think that's possible, albeit that it was. I short of sending gunboats out and blowing the small boats up, which not even Nigel would do, I don't think. That's not going to happen. But the start of it is illegal migrants and people in this country believing that the people who are in charge of the Home Office actually are going to do something about it. That itself would immediately reduce things. But I think a lot of reforms policies are not thought through, they're not detailed, they're putting out headline issues that telling the electorate where they want to go, and there's no harm in doing that, so long as you don't believe in the timescale. That's not going to happen. It's a bit like Donald Trump saying he was going to build a wall between Texas and Mexico, and the Mexicans were going to pay for it. Never happened, but people knew what his position was on migration.
And in terms of the reshuffle more generally, I mean, there was an opportunity there to bring in perhaps new blood. There are over 400 Labour MPs elected in 2024. We know that quite a number of people have just been moved into different locations. You say you don't criticise individual people, and that's fair enough. But in terms of the general sense, I mean, a lot of these people have just been moved into different positions, and I mean, really, is there much new blood there that we can say that things are going to get better? From your position as a Labour MP, do you think that this reshuffle is actually going to do what Keir Starmer intends it to do, wants it to do, and gives Labour some form of rejuvenation?
It's very difficult to avoid cliches at this stage, but it is moving the deck chairs about rather than stopping the government sinking down through the opinion polls. I think there was a case, or is a case, for new people taking new directions, whether it's on migration, energy, or other policies. And to take one issue that one of your listeners talked about, whether or not MPs, ministers are connected with the electorate, I think the Prime Minister should say to himself, but to all senior ministers, go and talk to these people demonstrating outside hotels that are hosting illegal migrants, not the violent ones, no time for violence, whether it's from left or right, but go and talk to people who genuinely are worried about these issues. Listen to them and explain why the government is doing what it's doing, or listen to them and change the policies, because there is a real circling of the wagons going on in government, both against the electorate and against the Labour Party.
So you're saying, sorry to interrupt you, Graham, but you are calling on the Prime Minister and senior members of your party to go to these protests, to talk to peaceful protesters, to hear from them. I mean, that's a very powerful message I haven't heard from a Labour MP before.
Well, it shouldn't be a powerful message. It should be something that people who are lucky enough to have been elected to positions of power on behalf of the electorate should always go and see. When I was leader of Manchester City Council, if there was a real difficulty, and the one that comes to mind was people were furious because they believed that an intermediate hostel for people moving out of prison was going to host paedophiles, and they were furious. And I went to talk to them. It was a bit scary because they were very, very angry. But I listened, they listened to me, and we actually resolved the problem. But as an elected politician, you don't learn anything. You don't get to the right policies if you don't actually go and talk to people who are concerned. Your civil servants, however good they are not going to give you the advice about how to deal with the problem that they themselves don't suffer from and don't know all the details.
Can you see what you're calling for happening? Can you see Shabana Mahmood? Can you see Keir Starmer going to outside, for example, the Bell Hotel in Epping, talking to local residents, listening to them, hearing their concerns, and then crucially doing something about it? Is that something realistically that you think the senior members of the Labour Party will actually do?
I would hope they would do it. I don't know if they're going to do it. There is no reason why they shouldn't do it. And Shabana, as I say, I've got an enormous amount of respect for Shabana. I think she's the best hope of the government reconnecting with people who've given up on us. In many ways. So I hope Shabana goes. She has been prepared to face down all sorts of things in her own constituency. She's been prepared to face down Quangos who wanted the most extraordinary, or were giving the most extraordinary advice to judges on basically that they should go easier on ethnic minorities in court. She faced that down.
She did, yeah. And I want to be absolutely clear with you, Graham, that I have no problem whatsoever with her faith. If she is Muslim, she says that's an incredibly important thing in her life. Great, good for her. I am not a person of faith. She is a person of faith. I have no problem with that whatsoever. However, a number of our viewers and listeners do. They're worried about that. And they've expressed that to me. I don't think that's necessarily a racist thing at all. I actually think that's just a concern that people have. I just want to ask you to reassure them, from your knowledge of Shabana Mahmood, that she will be fair, reasonable, and a good Home Secretary, in your opinion.
I don't know Shabana well enough to call her a friend, but I've observed her in the House of Commons. I've observed her through the media, and I see her as a thoughtful person who gets on top of the detail. And if there's a difficulty or problem, she tries to come to the right solution. So I've got faith in her.
Thank you very much indeed, Graham Stringer, their MP, who is Labour MP for Blackley and Middleton South. Appreciate him joining us today. We'll go to your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
But look, we laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everyone who's been in touch, including by sending your voice notes. Gavin's in Dorset, and has this to say.
Yeah, morning, Peter. It's Gavin from down in Dorset. Angela Rayner, I can't believe the amount of people that are coming online to defend her. My money would be on investigative journalists laid everything they had about her on the table, and that's when she decided to try and cover her tracks, and that's when she referred herself for investigation. The whole thing's a farce. People are waking up to how corrupt politics are now. I think the tables are turning. I think we're going to see massive changes.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Gavin. Heather's in Kent and has some thoughts on all the Conservatives that are joining Reform UK. Let's hear what Heather has to say.
Good morning, Peter. Heather from Kent. Yeah, I can understand fully people's concerns about Conservatives moving over to Reform, but, you know, let's be sensible about this. Nigel Farage is nobody's fool. He knows what he wants. He knows what he's doing. I have full faith in him because he has been walked over, trodden on, whatever, by so many people, but he's never, to my knowledge, actually gone back on what he said. He might have twisted things a little bit, had to tweak things a little bit, but he's never deliberately gone back like Starmer has. And he's nobody's fool. He will put his foot down, and if he thinks somebody's not playing the game that they're supposed to be playing, he won't have them in the party. He'll get rid of them. He will not. They will not have priority jobs.
Heather, thanks for your thoughts on that. Susan's been in touch about that as well and says, as a Reform member, I'm very unhappy with the idiotic things they're doing, like allowing Nadine Dorries to join the party. She is a disgrace, having blindly supported a corrupt sleazebag like Boris Johnson. It shows complete desperation and a lack of common sense by Reform UK. So what do you make of all of this? I'd love to hear from you. We've got about 17 minutes of the show left. We do have time for calls, 0344 499 1000. We'll get to more voice notes in a minute, but I want to take a call now from Tommy in Yorkshire, who's given me a ring. Tommy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I'd like to say, as a 70-year-old veteran and the son of an Italian immigrant, I'm disgusted with this government. It's now become a dictatorship. We're not allowed to say anything, do anything, show the flag. And, excuse me. I've been homeless for 17 years. I don't get any help from my local council. They keep fobbing me off with excuses.
You've been homeless for 17 years, Tommy?
17 years.
And when you say homeless, there are different types of homelessness. Do you mean you're living on the street, or are you living in temporary accommodation, or what sort of homelessness are you experiencing?
I don't qualify for temporary accommodation. So what I do is I've got a sort of camp here and there when the weather's good. When the weather's bad, I have to pay for a B&B out of my own pension. So, you know, there's no help for people like us. I mean, my dad came here in 47 after the war. He said, you didn't get any benefits. You had to go to work, find your own accommodation, and you weren't entitled to claim from the system unless you'd worked for 5 years. And that doesn't happen now.
Yeah.
So I remember in 1971, he told me, so there's 800,000 Bangladeshi refugees coming to the country. I said, well, if they need help, they said, no, you don't understand. He said, that amount of people in one lump, he said, would change the country. Right? And I didn't believe it at the time.
Yeah.
But the following year, 1 million Pakistanis came. The very people who were massacring the Bangladeshis also came to the country. Right? And they all got resettlement money and everything.
Do you think your situation's going to get better, Tommy? Do you think that that someone might help you in regard to your homelessness?
Well, no, because I've got cancer, so I'm going to die anyway. So,
Tommy, I'm so sorry to hear that you're going through this. Have you spoken? I mean, when you go to the council, what do they say to you?
Oh, you can't get to the council anymore. You have to phone them, right? And then 9 times out of 10, they won't see you either. They'll only talk to you over the phone, right? And they've told me I don't qualify because I'm a white middle-aged man, no children, no dependents, right? So I don't really qualify for it. I'm not in need. I just got a knockback.
I mean, you are in need because you don't have a home. Right. You don't have a roof over your head.
No, they let me bid on the bidding system, right? But I'm not allowed to have any accommodation.
That's dreadful, Tommy. I'm really sorry.
The only people in my town that I actually come from, I'm not there now. I hate it now because it's not the town I grew up in.
Yeah. And
every available space is given to illegal immigrants. There's 2 hotels, 2 great hotels, and not 4 years ago there was about 600 various types of illegals staying in there. Every vacant building is taken up with immigrants. Now they've moved them from hotels into HMOs and private housing.
Tommy, are there military charities that have reached out to you, Help for Heroes, or any of those kind of charities that have tried to help you?
A lot of them are a waste of time, to be honest. You know, like Veterans Gateway, but they might be able to help some people. But
Tommy, I want you to do something for me. If you okay, Tommy, just hold on a second. I just want you to do something for me, if you would. Would you just give your number to, not on the air obviously, but would you just give your number to another Tommy, to our assistant producer Tommy, and I'm going to put you in touch with someone after the show who might be able to help you. It's a guy called Johnny Ball who's been on the show before, and he's dealt with these kind of issues before. Would you take a phone call from him and just tell him your situation and see if we can maybe do something behind the scenes to try to help your situation, Tommy?
You see, the problem is there are military associations that can help people, right? But it depends on what part of the country you come from. A lot of parts of the country, say Northamptonshire, where I'm actually from, which at the moment is an immigration hellhole. They don't have anything in that area for veterans.
Okay. Well, would you chat to this guy I want you to chat to? If you just stay on the line, Tommy will take your number, or Finn, one of our producers, and we'll put you in touch with that guy. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Really appreciate that. And one of our producers behind the scenes will do that. Obviously, we won't give your number out on air or anything like that, Tommy. Let's speak to Sarah, who is in Somerset. Sarah is giving me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You can do that too before 1 o'clock. Plenty of time for calls. Sarah, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Poor Tommy, you know, it's disgusting how our veterans have been neglected, and how in many ways the white working class haven't been given any help whatsoever due to all the positive discrimination that we have going on in this country. It's there throughout all our occupations and even throughout our educational institutions, I think. But I was looking into the Fabians, and they seem to have given birth to the Labour Party, and they've sort of been around for about 150 years. And
yeah, it was actually my colleague Alex Phillips did quite a lot on this on a programme the other night. It was fascinating to listen to in terms of how many people at the top of the Labour Party have been members of the left-wing Fabian group. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that Lammy is one of them. I think Angela Rayner is one of them. Obviously, Tony Blair and Sherry, they were part of that. And if their agenda is totally based on an ideology, which obviously hasn't worked. So what I wonder is, when are these people going to see that they are not only failing themselves, but they are failing future generations, including their own children? If they had any sense whatsoever, they would come clean and say, okay, we had an ideology, it's not really working, we're certainly not heading towards a utopian England right now. We need to return to family values, we need to return to respecting the Judeo-Christian culture that England and Europe were actually based on. Otherwise, we're heading into an area of more discourse and more lawlessness, and the lack of respect that people like Tommy have had after literally sacrificing in many cases, their lives. I think this is treason.
Okay. Sarah, listen, thank you for your thoughts. I really appreciate them. That's Sarah in Somerset there. Rob has been in touch on WhatsApp to say, hi Peter, I never rated Nadine Dorries. She was a terrible culture secretary. She's just an opportunist who's clinging to the coattails of reform to try to get re-elected as an MP. Penny says it's nothing to do with racism in regard to Shabana Mahmood, but if she decides to do something that is against her, if she decides that to do something is against her Muslim faith, she will not do it, says Penny. Anthony says, what a shame that Labour didn't promote Graham Stringer to a ministerial role. He's everything that a politician should be. I'm a reform voter and I would welcome Graham to our party, says Anthony. Penny, as well, thanks for your message. I totally know exactly where you're coming from. Susan has been in touch and says, can I just point out that Blakely is pronounced Blakely, not Blackley? Yes, you absolutely can. My English geography is absolutely dreadful. I've been around a lot of England, a lot of Scotland, lots of Wales. I used to work actually on Question Time. I was senior producer on that programme about a million years ago, and we spent an awful lot of time time going around the country, so I've seen probably a bit more of Britain than many people, certainly, although the pronunciation of that place I was not particularly good at, and I do apologise for that. Elsa says it's far too late for ministers to go and talk to protesters, as Graham Stringer suggests. It should have happened immediately, and I believe if anyone's brave enough to go, they get a hostile reception. Graham Stringer is a nice man, but sadly deluded on this government, including Shabana Mahmood. I feel no Muslim should be given any power, given her self-proclaimed loyalty to Islam first, says Elsa. William and Horley says, great show as always, Graham Stringer MP. He would be good on Labour's front bench. He would be better with reform. At least there's some people in the Labour Party thinking what normal people are thinking. Well done, Graham Stringer. I want to take a call from Seamus in just a second, but before that I want to play a few voice notes. Rob in Starbridge has some thoughts on everything that's gone on this week. This is what Rob has
Peter,
to say.
it's Rob in Starbridge here, mate. Peter, just a couple of quick points regarding reform and all the Conservatives jumping ship. What I'll say is, just use them for their experience, like I was saying to Alex the other night. Use them for experience, but don't give them any ministerial positions. And the second one on David Lammy. Do you reckon when he fills in at Prime Minister's questions and they ask him something, do you think he's going to say, pass, 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 pass? Cheers, mate. Great show. Bye-bye.
Very good, very good. David Lammy is many things, but he is not a mastermind. Mark's in Manchester.
Hi, Peter. Mark from Manchester. Farage saying that he'll stop the votes in 2 weeks. Well, it'll be the French what will be stopping the votes in 2 weeks, because it'll take him 1 day to stop all their fishing licences. These people don't understand. We do have some pull, you know. We can stop the fishing licences, and let me tell you, the Frenchies will soon be out on the beaches stopping the boats, because they'll all lose all the livelihood, and then they'll all be on strike in France. And you know what it's like in France when they go on strike? They all go on strike together. Thanks, Pete. Nice, great show.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I slightly blotted my copybook with a friend of mine who married a French woman, and the first thing I said to her was, hello, lovely to meet you. Why are French people always on strike? It sort of never really recovered after that. Speaking of Nigel Farage, he has confirmed he wants to deport women asylum seekers back to the Taliban in Afghanistan if he becomes Prime Minister. The Reform UK leader's position on the topic has perhaps not been clear, with him previously saying he would send women back to the fundamentalist regime that took over after Western militaries withdrew, then saying he wouldn't. He spoke to Sky News at Reform UK's party conference in Birmingham. When asked whether he would detain women and children and send them back, he said yes. He's also been speaking to ITV as well. We have some thoughts on that. He said he will pass legislation to stop boats within 2 weeks, and he would tow boats back to France as an absolute last resort. On welfare, he said there are too many young people being put on disability benefits, and Lee Anderson will become welfare spokesman and would only scrap the 2-child benefit cap for working couples on low pay. So that's a bit of a change there. On defections, he said, we lack experience in government. We need people like Nadine who know the ropes. And the economy, he said he will press ahead with £90 billion of tax cuts. He says, have a look at Argentina. Have a look at Argentina. Everybody said absolutely, completely impossible for Milei to make public sector cuts to the extent that he has. Seamus is in Surrey and has given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Seamus, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
It's interesting to watch. I'm with Farage. I believe that I'm a Conservative that has left the Conservative Party and joined Reform. I think we're seeing the beginning of the end for Labour. I don't have any issues with Shabana Mahmood because I do think she's competent, but I do have significant concerns about the particular position that she's been given, because I have real issues around the number of Sharia courts that are currently active in this country, as well as Israeli family courts.
She may well have those too. I think you mean Jewish family courts. She would probably have those issues too, but it'll be just very interesting to see how she actually acts with that, Seamus.
Well, I want to get on the front foot. I want British law to trump everything.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. I don't think those courts should exist at all. Yeah, totally agree.
So I want those removed. I also want assurance around the creeping crawl towards a blasphemy law. I do not want to. I'm seriously concerned about freedom of speech. I have serious concerns that we are being blindly led in, and our constitution was changed drastically under Tony Blair through the back door. And we have lost lots and lots of freedoms since Labour were elected, and I do not trust Labour with our constitution. I don't trust them with our economy, and I'm not convinced that they are going to be able to do anything at all to address the complete and total decline this country is in.
Well, Seamus, I think a lot of people will feel the same way. Thank you for your call. I want to play a voice note now from Lisa.
Hi Peter, this is Lisa from Canterbury. Just listening to you about Mahmood. I have absolutely no issue with people's faith, but I do have an issue with certain types of faith, and I think that with Mahmood, I don't think it's right in a lot of things that she says. I think it will pose a lot of issues and a lot of worry for us Brits in the UK. I think it's heading in a very, very dangerous direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate your message. Just a little reminder when you're sending voice notes in, please do mute me. I love you listening to me. It's marvellous. Don't let me ever stop you doing that, but just it can be a bit distracting. We have quite a few listeners who have problems with their hearing, and we just want to make sure that you're as clear as possible and we absolutely hear every word that you have to say. So let's just make sure you mute the telly or the radio just when you're recording your voice note. Andy's in Birmingham and has some thoughts.
Afternoon, Pete. It's Andy from Birmingham. Hope you're well, mate. Great show as usual. About reform and stopping the boats in 2 weeks. Yeah, it'd be brilliant if you did, but you've got to start somewhere, and reform hopefully will start somewhere. You've got to take away the will of the people to